preview for UFC 284, Makhachev versus Volkanovski. I'm your host, Ben Duffy of SureDog.com. With me, as always, is Keith Schillen, the executive producer of the SureDog Radio Network. Keith, how are you doing today?
I'm doing excellent, man. How you doing, brother?
I'm doing pretty well. For a big pay-per-view card like we have coming up this Saturday, one with two title fights at the top, you know, a lot of goodies. It's always nice to have a little bit of a famine beforehand to build your appetite up for it. I mean, you and I both come from like the early 2000s days where you had 3 months to think about the next pay-per-view card and just get all that in your head. We don't have that, but in UFC Vegas 68, we had the next best thing to a famine, as that was one of the more forgettable UFC Fight Night cards in recent memory. You know, of course, it happened in the middle of the night because it was supposed to take place in Korea. That didn't end up playing out. But at any rate, I was already looking forward to this card by the middle of last week. How about you?
Yeah, so if I want to give it a letter grade, I'm only giving it a C. Yeah, I give it a C because to me it feels like a boxing card. And what I mean by that is it's got a really good high main event, as good of a main event that they can make, but the rest of the card is pretty shallow for a pay-per-view. In fairness, a couple fights fell through that made it weaker. Like I know they originally UFC was trying to get Rob Whittaker and Paulo Costa on this card. That obviously that's definitely a main card type bout, probably third from the top. So that fell through, and a couple of fights fell through.
Taikara France was supposed to be on this one, which would have been a high level fight and another New Zealander.
Yeah. So that kind of falls through. If the main event, something happens, guys, I'm knocking wood, and don't blame me if something happens. Something happens in the main event. Islam Makhachev doesn't make weight, something crazy happens. Yeah. This card's enough. Yeah. So that's why. But the main event is so high. It's like that like super nerdy kid who brings up the average of everybody else in the class.
Oh yeah.
That's what I think this does.
I agree. And on that topic, the main event here, Islam Makhachev defending his UFC lightweight title against featherweight champ Alexander Volkanovski. Where does this rank among the highest level fights in MMA history, like in terms of the current standing and skill level and achievements of the fighters that are fighting?
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, it really goes down to what you're saying, like skill wise. I mean, it's got to be right up there, because if you ask me, you know, what fight was I most excited about? Yeah, I mean the hoopla with Habib and Connor, like that got me. I mean, that was really big, even though I knew Habib was going to maul him, but. You know, I think about Fedor and Krokop, the fight of the century. That was way up there. I even think about like overhyped fights, Couture, Liddell 3, Tito and Shamrock, the first fight. Like these, like and there's probably a whole bunch of them. Yeah. If I'm thinking about overall skills and where they are in the rankings, and I know someone will say, oh, you know, top two guys in pound for pound and all this, and you know, whatever, that it's the most skilled. The only other fight that I can think of where I was like, wow, like this is really the two best guys is probably St. Pierre and BJ Penn too, when BJ Penn was moving up, and Cormier, John Jones, when they were fighting each other. That was like another one that I was like, wow, these are two probably the greatest light heavyweights ever, or you know. Also Cormier when he went up to fight Stipe Miocic, I think that's another one. Yeah. But yeah, I think this fight is unbelievable. I think we have two of the best fighters. I think I think the promotion of this, and I know Makhachev and Volkanovski kind of poo-pooed it a little bit. Like, this is as good of a fight you can possibly ever make in history, and you're not putting any promotion. I really think the UFC dropped the ball.
I agree, and it's strange. And I love your list that you threw out there. The only things I'd add in there would be Nunes versus Cyborg.
Oh,
and then it kind of snuck up on us because it wasn't like a cross-divisional super fight. But, I mean, when we look back on the fact that Davison Figueiredo and Brandon Moreno fought each other 4 times, 10 years from now, we're going to be like, dude, we were spoiled. Why were we sick of that?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
But because they came up in the same division, it didn't have that super fight feel. But I agree. This is the quietest all-time great matchup to sneak up on us that I can remember. These guys are the UFC's number 1 and number 2 pound for pound fighters.
Yeah.
They're, I think, both in Sherdog's top 5. Like Volkanovski's our number 1. And without looking, I think Makhachev is in the top 5 as well.
Yeah, and that's because no one loves the Sherdog rankings more than I do, but we have it wrong. Makhachev should be number 2. I think I argued for it. I think I got overruled, but
I can see that because, I mean, the way he beat Oliveira, I think he kind of picks up all of Oliveira's scalps.
Yeah, exactly. You know? Yeah. Like if some dude, like, I think about like the beginning of the Batman movie where they were robbing banks and then you shoot the other robber and you get his share.
Yeah.
It's kind of like that. Like he shot with the other robber.
I completely agree because the way he beat Oliveira, it's like, what, you don't think he could do that to Poirier or Gaethje or Chandler or any, yeah. I'm with you on that. Anyway,
I mean, but it's plain simple. The winner of this fight is gonna be number 1 in rankings on
no question.
Yeah, this week at the end of the week, number 1 in rankings. This guy. So this is what I'll say. If someone, is this the greatest fight ever made on paper? I don't know if that is. But if someone wants to argue with it, I'm not arguing against it.
Yeah. I mean, offhand, the only thing that would sweeten this a little bit more is if it weren't Makhachev's first title defense.
Yeah, if he had like a long run.
Yeah. Or, but right now the time is the time for Volkanovski. So
yeah, so absolutely.
And he's the one that's making the ballsy move to move up. He's the, this is happening on his time schedule, and I'm A-okay with that.
Yeah, that's the thing I feel like the UFC is not making more of now. You think about all right, let me ask you this question. And right now, if you're ranking the greatest fighters of all time, where's Volkanovski rank? And I'm saying like give me the exact number, but give me the ballpark.
He's in the top 10.
Yeah. If Alex Volkanovski wins this fight, he's on the Mount Rushmore for me.
Top 4, yeah. But he is
like him, Jones, GSP, and Anderson Silva maybe, or DJ or something like. He's in that club.
He is. Like, all of a sudden you're like, well, does he elbow out Jose Aldo? Does he elbow out Anderson Silva?
Exactly. Yeah, like he's in that category if he wins this. He's already knocking on that door anyways.
Yep.
But he's kicking the door right down if he wins this fight.
If he was 25-0 instead of 25-1, I think we'd already be talking about him in the top 3 because of that, meaningless loss at welterweight in like his 3rd fight. Yeah.
If you think about the guys that we were just talking about, who he joins the list with, he's doing something that these guys weren't willing to do. In his prime, he's willing to go up and fight up a weight class against a pound for pound great. I mean, Demetrius Johnson wasn't willing to do it when Dominic Cruz and TJ Dillashaw were the top dogs. Anderson Silva wouldn't do it when John Jones was top dog. John Jones is finally moving up to heavyweight, but it took forever. George St. Pierre never did it when Anderson. I mean, that would have been the fight. If George St. Pierre went up before Anderson Silva, that would be my answer to this question.
Yes.
But they weren't willing to do it. Alex Volkanovski is willing to do it. Now, I know people say, well, Henry Cejudo did it, and DJ did it, and BJ Penn did it. And I understand other people have done that. But of the guys we're talking about, it's only Alex Volkanovski.
Agreed. I mean, Penn had less to lose because his greatness was never built on like a 10-fight win streak.
No.
So he had nothing to lose and everything to gain by going big game hunting and saying, I'm going to go, beat up George St. Pierre on beer and hot dogs. And we love him for trying.
I feel like I see I throw out some random reference. I don't know why I thought of this, but I was thinking about, you ever watched The Wire?
I haven't. You've told me I have to.
Oh my God.
It's the greatest show that I've never watched.
It's the greatest TV show. I think it's number 1. It's so anyways, I'm going to give you a little spoiler. It's not a big spoiler, but there was like a guy who robs drug dealers. Mm-hmm. And in one scene, he would rob like smaller gangs, but there was like the one gang, the Stringer Bell, Barksdale, Avon Barksdale gang. That was like the gang of Baltimore. He only wanted to rob them, and everyone's like, dude, what are you doing? It's so easier. Like, that's Volkanovski. Volkanovski's like the Omar of the UFC. Everyone's like, hey, Alex Volkanovski, like, don't go after these guys. You can rip and run everybody else. What are you doing? He's the Omar. So like, He needs to come down whistling. Farmer in the Dell. That's shout out to all the Wire fans.
All right, I'm gonna have to watch The Wire.
It's the greatest TV show ever.
Get at me in the comments if you think I'm an idiot for not having watched The Wire yet.
Don't come at me. It's number one.
Yeah,
there's not a TV show in history, and I haven't seen every TV show in history, but whatever I've seen, it's number one.
It is the best of cards. It is the worst of cards. We just spent probably a good 5 or 8 minutes talking about where Makhachev versus Volkanovski ranks among the all-time matchups. And then that same main card has Justin Tafa versus Parker Porter, which, dude, I'm thinking about it. And I was thinking about it while I was researching this card. I think it might be the worst matchup you can make at heavyweight right now between two people who haven't fought each other yet.
Yeah, might be.
Yeah.
It's going to be like a 2-hour show. I want to spend an hour of it talking about the main event.
I'm here for it. You ready to dig into these prelims?
Yeah, let's do it.
First fight out of the gate at UFC 284 is a lightweight matchup between Zubaira Tukhugov and Elves Brener Oliveira, whom we will call Elves Brener from now on. Tukhugov, the 32-year-old Chechen, is 25-1 overall. He is 5-2-1 in the UFC. He is 2-1-1 since 2019. He came back in 2019 from a 3.5-year absence from the sport that we'll talk about in a minute. And since then, he has a draw against Laurent Murphy, a win over Kevin Aguilar, a loss to Hakeem Dawodu, and a win over Ricardo Ramos. That was back at UFC 267. He beat Ramos by unanimous decision, and he's been out for, another 15, 18 months since then almost. So, as is the case for most of his UFC career, the story here is another long layoff for Tukhugov. At age 32, he's going to try to give this thing one more run. He is at lightweight rather than featherweight, where he spent the bulk of his UFC career, or tried to. And standing in his way will be Elves Brener. The 25-year-old Brazilian will be making his UFC debut. He is 13-3 overall. He comes in on a 2-fight win streak, though those 2 wins come across like the last almost 2.5 years, both of them in mid-level Brazilian promotions. As you might expect from the relative pedigrees of these two guys, Tukhugov, currently the biggest favorite on the card. He is minus 550. Brener plus 375. I dug in and watched at least some of all of Brener's available fights and all of a couple of them. As a striker, the good thing about his striking is he throws a wide variety of strikes. He throws plenty of kicks, including some spinning stuff, step in and jumping knees. Not a whole lot of power, and I don't think it's because he lacks physical strength. He just doesn't put a whole lot of... He always looks like he's throwing at 80%. And that's all kind of beside the point, because what he really wants is to get his fights to the ground. He's definitely a grappling specialist. And my problem in watching him is he can't get fights to the ground on his terms. He has a terrible shot from outside. I just said his punches and kicks look like they're 80%. So does his shot. He just kind of flings himself at dudes' waists. And with bad fighters, it's enough to get him down. With better fighters, it hasn't been. And his last couple of losses, like Gabriel Santos and Denise Silva, both just kind of pancaked his takedown attempts, got him on his back. And while he's a good grappler, just, in the 2020s, trying to win all your fights from your back is just not a recipe for high-level success. And against Tukhugov, who at his best is a sharp, nasty striker with good takedown defense, I think this is just a poisonous matchup for Brener. I think he's going to get starched probably in the first round to round and a half. My question is, how much Tukhugov has left? Because in 2016, he was one of the hottest prospects in the featherweight division. He had kind of, he's Chechen and they're Dagestani, but he had the in thing of being kind of running with Khabib and his group.
Yeah. Anytime you can beat up Conor McGregor, you're a star. Well,
here you go. This is almost Tukhugov's last chance to make himself because right now he is most famous for a punch he landed not in a sanctioned fight.
Yeah.
If he doesn't want to go down as the guy who sucker punched Conor McGregor, he's got to kind of step on it now. And even before the McGregor suspension that got him yanked from his fight with Artem Lobov, he was already well on his way to completing the hat trick of UFC fight withdrawals. He's had a drug failure suspension. He has had a blown weight cut that caused his fight to be canceled on fight week. And he's had multiple injuries that have had him off for a year or more. I mean, the guy's been in the UFC for like 8 years and he has 8 fights. It's just, he's a talented fighter. At least the last time we saw him, he's still like physically a plus athlete with good power, but he's running out of time. And
shout out to Dylan Dennis right now being like, why is he so busy?
Dylan Dennis, you know, if he fought at 149 pounds and just waited for the UFC to find people in between their weight classes, you know, he could be a lot more relaxed. Yeah. My biggest worry about this fight is that Tukhugov is just going to thrash Brener, and we're not going to learn anything about either guy. And that's kind of what I'm predicting here. Give me Tukhugov by first round knockout, and you know the wheel continues to turn.
Yeah, the bigger question for this fight is if you're the UFC and you're going back to Perth and you're bringing in a guy by the name of Elvis, who's a submission specialist, why didn't you call him the king of rock and rumble, Elvis Australia's own? Come on, UFC, dropping the ball, king of rock and rumble.
And I mean, I don't know if you've seen him, but Elvis Sinisik is in a kind of shape he never was during his fight career. That dude is jacked now.
Yeah, he used to have like a little Chuck Liddell pot belly thing.
Yeah,
you know? What Connie used to call Nate, like what do you
skinny fat?
Skinny fat.
Yeah.
Tukhugov, I mean, he's well rounded. He does carry his hands a little low for my liking, but that's because he likes to slip in rip. He's a pressure counter striker that lands at different angles. He's a nice sharp up jab. His left hook is his best strike. He loops it over his opponent's straight right, which I like. I mean, it's dangerous, but when it lands, it's always like they don't see it coming. Plus power, extremely good wrestler. He chain wrestles really well, explodes through your hip kind of guy, cuts the corner well. That said, I was surprised how he struggled to take down Ricardo Holmes. I've been leaving that in my notes. But I think that, like I said this last time, I think that says more about Ricardo Holmes than it does about Tukhugov. Good top game, good control, good ground and pound. He has gassed out in the pass, but again, I think that's just like an outlier than what it is. Brener, he's only 25, so I like that. He does need some more seasoning, though. He's a bit flat-footed. He has tons of defensive flaws. He backs straight up. He keeps his chin high in the air. He pulls his head straight back. He lacks head movement. He hates being pressured. He does throw a lot of combinations like that. He's got decent pop. He will wrestle. He likes like upper body takedowns. Good to get into those scrambles. Kind of like a funk style wrestler where he's you're not your powerful guy. He's more get a scramble happen and see what happens. Hard ground and pound. He's as you mentioned, he's a serious submission. He's got 11 subs. He can get subs off his back, but he's on his back a lot because he's a weak defensive wrestler. He struggles to get back up. But I do like that I've seen him fight like hard 15 minutes in very grappling heavy matchup. And so he's got pretty good cardio. Brenner's a fun action fighter, but I think this is a terrible stylistic matchup. I think Tukhugov is miles ahead of him. I say everywhere, other than maybe a straight jiu-jitsu match. Tukhugov's I think he can win on the ground. I think he wins on the feet. I think he starches him on the feet. I think he lands a big shot. I think he follows up some good shots on the ground. So kind of like a drop him with a shot and then finish up with some ground and pound. Give me Tukhugov by first round TKO.
We head now to the men's featherweight division for a matchup between Shane Young and the debuting Blake Bilder. Young, the 29-year-old New Zealander, is 13-6 overall. He is 2-3 in the UFC. He's currently on a 2-fight losing streak, those being a first-round head kick knockout loss to Ludovic Klein at UFC 253 back in 2020, then a unanimous decision loss to Omar Morales at UFC 260 back in March of 2021. He steps in now after almost 2 full years off and looks to get back on track against Bilder. The 32-year-old Minnesota native is 7-0-1, undefeated as a pro. He comes to the UFC by way of Dana White's Contender Series, where he choked out Alex Morgan last August. And previous to that, he was the CFFC featherweight champ. Odds here, despite Bilder's positive momentum, despite Young's long absence and losing streak, Young is the slight favorite here. He's minus 135, Bilder plus 105 as the underdog. Keith, two things surprised me in getting ready to talk about this fight. One, how long Shane Young has been gone. And just, man, 2 years passed by like that. It must be an old man thing. I don't know. Like, but the other thing is kind of
really,
yeah.
You were really waiting on Shane Young to return.
No, I was waiting. I was just like, has it even been a year? And I'm like, oh my goodness, it's been 2. That's all.
It's honestly, it's felt like forever for me. Like just waiting on Shane Young. That's what I just
yeah. Okay. Keith's got like some candles in front of a little like shrine to Shane Young somewhere in his house. Like that's just off camera. You can see his family, and then like the Shane Young section is just off to the side there. And then the other thing, just kind of for a prospect of his moderate apparent upside, kind of how much shine Blake Bilder has gotten. I mean, the guy has been showing up in kind of interviews saying, yeah, I'm going to be in the UFC one day since like his second pro fight. And part of that is, being in CFFC where, John Morgan has interviewed him a bunch of times, but he doesn't lack for confidence. The guy knows how to cut a promo. I mean, this is a guy who, when he won on the Contender Series, bought a Rolex. Like that says something about how you think you're going to do. Like that says something about how you think you're going to do in your.
I just need to provide for my family, feed my kids. Now this guy,
like,
screw those kids. I'm getting a Rolex.
I mean, talk to me a little bit about Blake Bilder. I mean, tell me how you think this fight will go. But he's a guy that clearly the boisterous personality, the Paddy, the Connor type thing is there if he can keep winning fights.
I hope he wins in Perth and come back with like a kangaroo or something, like a golden boomerang or something. I didn't know you bought a Rolex. That's fantastic. I honestly, I know. I mean, as a disciple of Dave Ramsey, shout out to all the Dave Ramsey listeners. I wouldn't suggest that, man. Cash is king, my brother. Pay those bills, go through the baby steps. But yeah, do your thing, man. You gotta look good. You gotta know what time it is, especially when you're in Perth. The time change. So that you threw me in the loop on that one. I love it. Shane Young, the long lost love Young. I think he's better than his record shows. He fights at a high pace. It's a bit of like a controlled pressure, busy jab. I love that he just touches and waits for an opening. When the opening is there, he unloads. He sits on his punches. He's strong in the pocket. Throws a lot of combos. I like that he mixes in his combinations like body shots and head shots, and not just head hunting. I'd say he lacks overall power. Defensively, he's got some skills, strong head movement, but he does get hit a lot because he moves forward, but like his overall head move is pretty good. Good offensive wrestler, doesn't look for it. I mean, he does wrestle, but he's an Australian wrestler. He's not gonna out wrestle top guys. Pretty weak defensively. Bilder's 32 years old already, so I don't like that. But the skills on the feet is boxer. He moves, a lot of movement, moves well. He moves, he bob and weaves and stuff, and he kind of rolls with the punches. He keeps everything in tight, what I do like. He pills a lot, what I don't like. But his punches are short shots, which I do like. He's got some good pop. He's been hurt a lot. He's been dropped. I go back to like his last fight in CFFC. He was dropped, I think 2 times in the first round. So don't like that, especially taking a step up, which I don't know if Shane Young is a big step up from the CFC, but I mean, just overall in his long term of the UFC. But everything I say about his feet and he also has, he's got some pretty good calf kicks, but he doesn't check calf kicks, which I don't like. But everything he does is to get the fight to the ground. He's a really good grappler, really slick back takes. We saw it in the Contender Series. We've seen it in CFFC. He's got 4 submission wins, including one on the Contender Series. I think it's a really hard fight to call. Even though I said I think these guys I said Young I think is better than his record shows and Bilder, Mr. Rolex. I still see like lower UFC talents. I kind of like their styles. I think we're gonna have a back and forth war, but because I see an advantage on the ground with a newcomer where he can end the fight with a submission at any time, I feel more comfortable taking him. I don't know if he's going to get a submission. So I'll take Bilder. I'll say it's a war, and I'm going to say Bilder wins by split decision.
All right. Yeah, I like that breakdown a lot, especially of Bilder's skills. We just finished talking about Elvis Brener, and my problem with Brener is that obviously he's a guy that wants to fight on the ground and doesn't seem to have a reliable way to get it there. Like, just I don't think his offensive wrestling is that great. Bilder doesn't have that problem. Like, he's got pretty good entries. I don't know what his wrestling background is, but good entries, good finishing, chain wrestles pretty well. And yeah, he's heavy on top when he gets a guy down. Just very good at advancing position, threatening with submissions without risking losing his position. Just a methodical grappler. He on the ground, he comes across more confident and composed than a guy with his relatively few professional fights would seem to indicate. I've gone back and forth on this one, and I've been leaning towards Bilder. If this fight were taking place and Shane Young had fought 6 months ago, even off those losses to Klein and Morales that we saw, I'd feel more comfortable taking Young, but I just don't know what he's going to look like almost 2 full years after that loss to Morales. Bilder is the guy with momentum. He's the guy that we've seen more recently. Obviously, he's riding high on the confidence. Dave Ramsey just got a nosebleed wherever he is, as this guy bought a Rolex, presumably against the assumption that he's going to win his UFC debut, which just sounds like.
Make sure we put hashtag like Dave Ramsey in the download. We get some more bumps in the clicks.
We'll get a reaction video from him where the still is just like him going like this, like he does it afterwards.
The cover will be a picture of Dave Ramsey. That'll be our cover. For
yeah.
UFC
Dave's just like pulled his glasses off. And not a whole lot of confidence in this one. If Young is able to just use his footwork and piece Bilder up from range, I won't be that shocked. I think he's a more skilled overall fighter, but I'm going with the more known quantity here. Give me Bilder by decision as well. And that should be one hell of a post-fight interview he cuts there.
I hope so.
Side question. Is Robert Whittaker the best Australian MMA wrestler in the history of the sport?
That's like saying, are we live right now? Or
yeah, we're live. I'm
okay, I don't know
on the end of the segment. No, yeah.
No, I'm glad I stopped myself before what I was going to say. I guess. Who wrestles from Australia?
If it's not him,
Volkanovski wrestles a little bit.
Volkanovski is up there. If it's not one of them,
Volkanovski, I feel like is check it like every answer, like check the box.
Yeah,
like Volkanovski. Tyson Pedro wrestles a little bit. I don't know,
dude. It ain't Tyson Pedro. Like,
if
it's not one of them, it's literally someone like Chris Haseman from like 1999.
Yeah,
who was like mopping shit up, and that just because he was a big, strong dude when not a whole lot of fighters were. Yeah,
good throwback, Chris Haseman. Nice stuff.
Yeah,
that's why you're the best of the best.
I have my moments.
I don't know. It probably is Whittaker. I'm sure there's somebody we're not thinking of.
I'm sure there is.
Oh, who's he's not a wrestler. What are the judo guy?
Anthony Parash?
Huh?
Anthony Parash?
No. He's like an old man.
No. The old Dan.
Yeah.
Not Dan Quinn. Dan Quinn was the crazy guy. Dan.
Yeah, that guy. Well, anyway, that guy. I know he didn't really wrestle, but he had some judo throws here and there. And he actually went on a nice, like, decent run for an old man.
Oh yeah, he was like dad bod Misha Serkinov for a year or two there. Name? Yeah.
Dan Kelly.
Thank you. Yes.
Give it to. You know what? Ron Whittaker's got enough accolades. We'll give it to Dan Kelly.
There you go.
Even though he's like judo and
Dan Kelly. Yeah. Either that or George Soteropoulos when he's allowed to wear his grappling spats. Like, like all taped up from like ankle.
But someone's gonna be like, hey, didn't Rob Whittaker qualify for the Australian Commonwealth Games? It's like, yeah, that's like me qualifying for the backyard, like horseshoes tournament from Coventry, Rhode Island. Like,
yeah, it's no Kentucky Judo Federation.
Yeah.
Next up, the strawweights take the cage, as it is Konklak Suphisara, whom we will call Loma Lookboonmee from now on, versus Elise Reed. Decorated striker, crossed over to MMA, has had solid but not spectacular results thus far in MMA. We've kind of seen where she hits her ceiling or hits the wall. She's 27. I mean, she's not like the bubbly 22-year-old that we saw in Invicta a few years back. Does she win here? Like, does she justify those almost 3-1 odds? And is there a route into the top 10 for her, or is she just too limited?
Well, one thing we used to always say about her is how undersized she was for the weight class. I mean, she's really an atomweight, and she wasn't a big atomweight. But if you see her lately, she's put some size. Now, obviously, she's not vertically getting bigger, but she's getting bigger horizontally. And I don't mean that in an insulting way. Like, she's getting thicker. She's putting on some muscle on her frame. I mean, she's so that's the best that she could do. So she's not undersized. She's a really good striker. I mean, she's a Muay Thai specialist with fast hands, really underrated power, really quick kicks. Her teep kick up the middle is her like her go-to, her bread and butter. She likes to battle in the clinch. I mean, I go back to the Jin Yu Fry fight where she just like battered Jin Yu Fry in the clinch. She's really good at like creating a little bit of space, framing, landing small shots, strong knees, strong elbows, very like that traditional Muay Thai style. She has improved her wrestling like dramatically. I mean, she got 4 takedowns against Sam Hughes and 4 takedowns against Denise Gomez in her last fight. She was taken down 4 times against Lupi Godinez, but like that's Lupi's game. Like, she's a power wrestler, not really Elise Reed style. Reed, on the other hand, she's a pressure striker. I like her volume, very tight, very technical boxing, stiff jab. I'd say she's got some pretty good zip on her power shots. Her straight right is her best punch. She lacks like one punch ending power. Again, I mean, she's a strawweight, that happens. But I would say that for fighters in the division, she's one of the harder hitters in the division, I think, or one of the sneakier hitters in the division. She's got some big defensive holes, though. She does keep her chin high in the air. She's open to calf kicks due to her very like traditional boxing style. Go back to the Melissa Martinez fight. Martinez like just kicked her legs out. She kept kicking her legs out. She will get in the clinch and grind in there, and that's because she's like a very gritty type fighter. She does need to learn how to pummel a little bit better. It's not like her natural thing for her. Her offensive wrestler has improved. She hit some trips on Melissa Martinez in the last fight, which I like. Some good ground and pound. I always go back to the fight where she was almost submitted by Hilly Rose, which I mean, again, I'm going with almost, so it is what it is, but like I've never been high in Hilly Rose at all. So it didn't really look that good. She's a weak defensive wrestler overall, really struggles to get back up to her feet. And like going back to the Sam Hughes fight, she showed no urgency to get back up, but that's what's even more concerning. I think Elise Reed is better than most people do. But that said, this is not the matchup for her. This is a terrible stylistic matchup for her. Loma is way too fast for her on the feet. I think she brutalizes her with leg kicks. I think if Reed wants to get to the clinch where she feels a little comfortable, that's Loma's like field too. I think Loma beats up there. I think Loma dominates her. We might even get a 10-8 round in here. Give me Loma by decision, like a one-side shellacking.
Yeah, I'm with you here. And you mentioned that, you were a little higher on Elise Reed than some other observers. I'm included among them. Like I will freely admit that I've underestimated Reed. In fact, I think I picked against Reed in all 4 of her UFC bouts, and she's 2-2. So this would normally be the point where I come around and start overcompensating the other way. But this ain't the fight for that to happen, because I agree with you that this is a bad matchup for Reed. As a boxer who's susceptible to leg kicks, she's not going to be comfortable in boxing range against Loma, because Loma just tacks on those low kicks just effortlessly, along with her punching combinations. She is somebody that you mentioned, like she's becoming more comfortable as an offensive wrestler, but in my observation, her safety valve when she doesn't like what's happening on the feet is to try and force the clinch. That is not a happy place against Loma either. So yeah, all of her tendencies turn into worse tendencies against someone like Loma. And just looking at Loma Lobumi, the people who've beaten her in the UFC, they did it by doing things that Elise Reed has not demonstrated she can do. I mean, Hill managed to outdo Loma in the clinch, but obviously Loma would destroy Angela Hill in a straight up Muay Thai match. I mean, she's a former world champ, whereas Angela Hill is a good Muay Thai striker for MMA. Yeah. But at the time, Hill was just a little bigger, a little stronger, and much more experienced in fighting in a cage. And it just was too much for Loma at that time. And then Lupe Godinez, where there's almost nobody at strawweight that can do that like she can. Like just physically ragdolling people like Lupe does. I mean, that's something that Jessica Andrade could do if she decided she just wanted to wrestle all the time. But aside from that, like it's kind of Lupe's thing. And neither of those things are things that Elise Reed is going to do. So I agree. This is going to be a wood chipper fight. I don't know if we get a finish. Just finishes via strikes are kind of rare at 115, unless you are Jessica Andrade or Weili Zhang and have that one shot power. But Elise Reed's going to look like she's going to look like she got hit by a car. Like she's going to keep trying to hang in boxing range with Loma, get her legs chewed up. She forces the clinch. She's going to get battered. I'm with you. Lopsided decision for Loma here. Next up, we head to the men's featherweight division once again for the first of two Australia versus New England fights on this card. So we might as well just skip Keith's part entirely because we know which way he's going. It is the debuting Jack Jenkins versus Don Shainis. Jenkins, the 29-year-old Australian, is 10-2 overall. He comes to the UFC through Dana White's Contender Series, where he knocked out Freddie Linares last September. And prior to that, he was on a 7-fight win streak, and he is the outgoing Eternal MMA featherweight champ. He will look to make a successful UFC debut against Shainis, who is still looking for his first UFC win. The 31-year-old from Stoughton, I remember now, you corrected me because I said Stoughton when we talked about his last fight. It's Stoughton, formerly of Glory MMA and Fitness. I don't know where he trains now, but presumably not there. He is 12-4 overall. He is 0-1 in the UFC. He made a short notice debut against Sadiq Yusuf last October at UFC Fight Night Dern versus Jan, which, yeah, that sounds like some rough sledding for your UFC debut. And sure enough, he got guillotined in just 30 seconds. So gets a mulligan on that one, gets another shot here, but against the fairly highly regarded prospect in Jenkins, he is once again a whopping underdog. Jenkins right now minus 320, Shainis plus 240. Keith, Stoughton's finest.
Yeah, he's not that bad. Jeez. It sounds like it's like Jay Ellis out there, New England's own Jay Ellis. Maybe that's who he's training with now. Maybe that's why. Maybe he lost his part. Hey, let me call him Jay. Let's see what Jay's doing.
He's like, I was at the bus stop, and then suddenly Jay Ellis was like, "Hey, you want to spar?"
Yeah, Jake is not that good. They're acting like, oh, he lost James Krause, and he's like, he's training. He's from Boston, so he's training with the guy that Matt Damon beat up in Good Will Hunting. Like, he tracked him down. Hey, remember me from kindergarten? Like that's Don Shainis' training partner. So
it's not even that. It's like the ponytailed Harvard guy that he checks in the bar.
Yeah, how do you like them apples? Yeah.
Anyway, right. Talk to me about this fight, man.
Okay, Shainis. I don't even remember. I don't mind him. I do think he's like, we asked this question before. Like, is this guy a UFC talent? And I'm like, yeah, well, no and yes. Like, he's as good as the lowest guys. He's also as bad as guys who are in the regional scene that could be in the UFC. Mm-hmm. But like, he's not other New England guys that I've gone off on. Me like, no, definitely not. Like, Shainis got some skills. High output. He's a bit of a brawler. High guard defense. I'd say plus power. He can crack. He's got some hard leg kicks. He does throw them without a setup. He's got to get cracked for that. He's been rocked a bunch in the past. He will wrestle a little bit. He'll sneak in a takedown. I wouldn't categorize him as a wrestler, though. But he's strong on top. I like that he looks to advanced position, and he's got some good hard ground and pound. He was submitted in his last fight against Yusuf, Sadiq Yusuf, which is wasn't a good sign. He was submitted quick. He got hurt in that fight. He almost got knocked out. But the worst thing I think in that fight, he showed some poor fight IQ when he was locked in a really tight plum clinch. He was like trying to punch his way out instead of trying to like pummel back in. And Yusuf just destroyed him with knees up the middle. Jenkins, he's a pocket boxer. I think he's a little stiff on the feet. Like makes himself a little bit, makes himself a little bit of a target that way. He does switch stances a lot. He's got some good kicks though, hard body kicks, good calf kicks, but he tends to back straight up. He does like to clinch, and he's got some decent clinch striking. Like he can get a little grimy in there. I've seen some nice leg sweeps from in there, so that's something we might watch for. It'd be cool if he hits that. He will look to wrestle. He's got good entries, good top control. Looks to advance on the ground. Good ground and pound. He likes to, like his last fight, he likes to sit in the guard and throws those like Tito Ortiz sliding elbows, which we don't see that much anymore. He has 3 submission wins. You asked who's the best Australian wrestler. Maybe it's Jack Jenkins. Maybe, I don't know. Like he can wrestle a little bit.
I mean, he had a mullet. Got that like little like very very Iowa. Had a little Lincoln McElravy like just like locks going on there. Yeah.
I think this fight is pretty evenly matched. So if I'm placing a bet, and we're not, I want to remind everybody that we're not a betting website. Like we don't say, hey, pound plus 515 here and sprinkle the under, and but if I was a betting guy, I would actually go with Shainis because of those. I like those odds. That said, I am going with Jenkins because he's not from New England. I think he's the more well-rounded fighter though. So I think he can probably, I might even give the slight edge to Shainis on the feet, but I think on the ground, I think Jenkins, the fact that if it hits the ground, and chances are Jenkins will be on the top. So I think he hits a takedown or two. I think that's going to be enough in a fairly close fight. So give me Jenkins by decision.
Yeah, I mean, we know that earlier in his career, Jenkins was susceptible to submission. I mean, he has like his only losses are submission losses early in his career. He's developed as a wrestler since then, and his submission defense, it hasn't been tested. Like, we know that on the Contender Series, for example, he took down Freddie Linares effortlessly. Like, I think in all 3 rounds, at least in the first 2, he took him down and beat him up real bad on the ground. And that was kind of the what defined the fight. Like, by the end of the second round, Linares was cut up real bad. Jenkins was obviously way ahead. I don't know what it'll look like if Jenkins takes Shainis down. Like, I haven't seen enough of Shainis's groundwork. I don't know if he can threaten Jenkins. I don't know if he can sweep and get back up. That's what, again, if we were a betting show, would make me a little more hesitant to advocate for betting on Shainis, just because Jenkins does have that safety valve. Like, I have the feeling he's going to be able to get Shainis down if Shainis is getting the better of the striking. That's kind of the dynamic of the fight to me. Because of that, I'm going with Jenkins by decision here. But I agree with you that Shainis is better than he looked in his 30 seconds of work, on short notice. And will be interesting to see like what he looks like after a few months in a new training situation. 145 is an unforgiving division. Hopefully he gets this and at least one more shot to kind of show what he can do. Next up, it is the lightweights as Jamie Mullarkey welcomes Francisco Prado to the UFC. Mullarkey, the 28-year-old Australian, is 15-5 overall. He's 3-3 in the UFC. He won his last time out. It was a split decision win over Michael Johnson last July at UFC on ESPN Dos Anjos versus Fiziev. That close and to the point of being controversial. I'm sure it'll come up during this preview segment, but that did allow him to get back on track after a second round knockout loss to Jalen Turner last March at UFC 272. He will look to make it 2 in a row and 4 wins in his last 5 against the debuting Prado, who steps in on short notice for Nasrat Haqparast, who withdrew with an injury. Prado, the 20-year-old, yes, you heard that right, 20-year-old undefeated Argentinian, 11-0 in his mixed martial arts career, almost all of which has taken place in Argentina's Samurai Fight House promotion. Again, that will probably come up in a few minutes as well, but he was active as recently as last December, where he appeared at Samurai Fight House 8 and knocked out a dude you've never heard of in about a minute and a half. Perhaps due to the short notice, the difference in level of competition, Mullarkey is unsurprisingly a strong favorite here, minus 260. Prado plus 200 on the comeback. Prado is a tough prospect for me to assess. He is 20 years old. Good things about him for a 20-year-old. He doesn't look like a 20-year-old. He looks like a 28-year-old. He looks like a guy that's already coming into his physical prime. Like, he's a pretty big lightweight. He's got plenty of muscle on him. He's a good athlete. But he's obviously ultra raw. And he has that thing of we've talked about this on previews before. I talked about it on the recap last night. When someone comes to the UFC with a very nice looking defeated or almost undefeated record, you really have to consider the source. You know, when someone comes over from China and they're like 17-1, you got to wait and see. Whereas somebody comes over from Russia and they're 17-1, you're like, they're probably pretty good. Prado coming from Samurai Fight House. I mean, if the name Samurai Fight House is ringing a bell for you, it's because Eileen Perez debuted in the UFC late last year and came from Samurai Fight House, where she just thrashed women that weren't even wearing like proper fight gear, and they're fighting on like the preschool interlocking like foam rubber mats for the surface of their cage, like just obviously in a gym. They've gotten a little better in the last year or so, but they are one of the lowest of low-level South American promotions. And Prado has the look of somebody who's been able to do whatever he wants to all of his opponents, just with sheer aggression, athleticism, and a couple of go-to skills. Like, he hits with a ton of power because he swings real hard, but tons of defensive holes in his striking. He's been able to get just bully takedowns on people when he wants to, either people in the middle of collisions or people he's already hurt with his strikes, just kind of runs them to the ground, where he does have he has a number of submissions, and there's stuff just like, rear naked choking people that haven't really been able to deal with it, getting a Von Flue choke on somebody recently. Just none of that's going to work on Mullarkey. I have no idea whether Francisco Prado is going to turn into a solid prospect. Like, if he's still in the UFC 2 years from now, maybe he like loses to Mullarkey, loses his next one, and then starts to get on track. That wouldn't surprise me. Or if he bounces from the UFC entirely, that wouldn't surprise me either. It's too early to tell, and it's too early for him to take on Jamie Mullarkey. I mean, I thought Mullarkey lost to Michael Johnson, and that just broke my heart, because the one fight where Johnson actually fights a pretty smart, pretty consistent fight and kind of gets jobbed on the cards just made me feel bad for him. But Mullarkey is just, he's too good a boxer. If Prado kind of rushes heedless at him with, just big haymakers, Mullarkey's he's going to piece him up. If he tries to take him down, I'm interested to see that. But I didn't see anything in Prado's tape that made me think, okay, that's a route to victory against Jamie Mullarkey. That's going to work against him. And Mullarkey himself is a guy that's probably still improving as well. So I understand the line here. Again, jury will remain out on whether Prado is UFC material, but he's not going to prove it on Saturday. Give me Mullarkey to just chew up Prado badly on the feet, thwart his takedown attempts, and probably knock him out in the second round.
Yeah, Jamie Mullarkey is he's definitely like an overachiever. That's what I think about Jamie Mullarkey, a guy that when he first joined the UFC, I thought it was going to be like his 2 fights out the door. But he's really surprised me. He's unathletic, but he just makes up for it with just being super tough. He isn't very fast, but he just is busy, constantly marching forward, high volume. I go back to the Brad Riddell fight, a fight that he lost, and he gave him problems. I thought he beat Faris Ziam, obviously his first name. I thought he should have won that fight. His volume, I've kept this in my notes. His volume broke Devontae Smith. Like, he took over with that. His limited athleticism and limited defensive skill will get him in trouble against like the physically God-gifted guys like a Jalen Turner. So that's when he'll look bad against that. But guys that aren't that, he can make himself a nice career in the UFC just by Darren Elkins it a little bit, because he's just going to keep going forward. I mean, and he can hit harder than he gets credit for. He knocked out Devontae Smith. He knocked out Common Worthy. He hurt Brad Riddell in their fight. So don't sleep on his power. I love his intelligence. I like that he works the body. That's a big part of his game. I like that he gets inside, looks to wrestle a little bit. He can chain wrestle a little bit. He also has this like unbreakable will to just keep going when it gets tough. Due to his lack of wrestling background, he isn't a strong topside grappler. He needs to improve that. He needs to improve his control. But if you put him on his back, he'll just continue to work right back up to his feet. And his cardio he's going to go hard for all 15 minutes. Now, you mentioned Francisco Prado being 20 years old. I love that you said that. He's 20 years old, but he looks like he's 28. Like, what does that mean, man? Like, he's starting to bald a little bit, get a little bit of belly. Like, he's 28, so he's like sitting in a cubicle somewhere, just like regretting his life choices because his mom.
He might be on Sunday morning, but
yeah, like every time his boss walks away, he's checking Indeed to see if there's any new openings or something better. Regretting his psychology degree that he got, and he's got to make sure he gets out at 4 because he's got to go over to Outback Steakhouse for his second job because his mom just kicked him out of his house.
Damn,
that's what's
painting a dark picture.
That's what's going on with Prado.
I was thinking of it as a compliment. 28 is the prime of life. God.
28 is good. I mean, he's got to be in bed by 10 because he's 28 now. Yeah. Like, usually you'd go out at 10. Now he's going to be in bed because he's got responsibility. He actually has to pay. As far as like where he fought, like his last fight, I mean, like I didn't want to call it a gymnasium. It felt like one of these like escape rooms. Like like you get past this door and then like your next room you get in is like an octagon and you got to like fight past somebody to get to the next room. Like it was that small.
And
like,
then after everybody escapes, then we'll go to the axe throwing bar next door. It'll be a great Saturday night.
But he's got to be in bed by 10 though.
Oh yeah.
So, yeah, there was one point there was like these guys that were just like the guys walking around the one fight I was watching, the guys were walking around the cage, they're like holding bear, but they were like walking to their seat and they're like right next to the cage. Like there was no security, nothing. I'm like, what is going on? I'm counting the people in the audience. It was like yeah, I mean, he's a pressure. I'd say a pressure counter striker, a lot of L step in. He has power. I mean, he's got 5 KOs and he's only 20 years old. So he's kind of really coming into his power. He really like springs into his shots, like launches himself into his shots. So he throws, because of that, he throws a lot of wild, crazy strikes like a crazy man, a lot of looping shots. But if he connects, he's got some power. He also throws a lot of high kicks. Doesn't really set up, just throws them. Doesn't really set him up with anything. You mentioned his wrestling. He's good entries. He showed off how strong he is. He can just get around a guy's leg and slam him. Weak defensive wrestler though. Like some low level guys took him down. He struggled to get back up. But if he scrambles, he gets stopped. He's got hard ground and pound. He's got 6 submission wins. The biggest question mark is his cardio. Like he's never fought 50 minutes. He stops everyone quickly. Of the 2 fighters, Prado probably has the higher upside. Like if one guy is a top 10 guy one day, then it's Prado. But Mullarkey is tough as hell to make in your UFC debut. He's a tough for anybody in the UFC debut, especially a 20-year-old who hasn't really faced anybody. I think Mullarkey might weather this early storm if Prado comes out blitzing, and when he starts to fade, Prado, if he fades at all, that's when Mullarkey just turns up the volume, breaks him like he does everybody. I think he gets a finish. I'm gonna say he doesn't like the second round. Give me Mullarkey by second round TKO.
All right. Next up, we dip into the men's flyweight division for a matchup between the debuting Shannon Ross and Kleydson Rodrigues. Ross, the 33-year-old Australian, is 12-6 overall. As mentioned, this will be his UFC debut. He appeared on the Contender Series last August, where he lost to Vinicius Salvador by second round TKO. Nonetheless, he gets the call up here to appear in his native country and will face Rodrigues, a fellow Dana White's Contender Series product. The 27-year-old Brazilian is 7-2 overall. He is 0-1 since joining the UFC last year. He won his way into the organization on the 2021 Contender Series. Didn't debut until last May. He faced CJ Vergara at UFC 274 and came out on the wrong end of a split decision after a pretty thrilling fight. So he'll be looking to get his first Octagon win as well. He is a comfortable favorite to do so. Rodrigues minus 280, Ross plus 210. Keith, I'm gonna kick this one to you, but I have a curiosity, and I hope you can solve it for me, because it's no shock anymore when somebody loses on the Contender Series and gets the call up to the UFC. Nowadays, everyone who wins gets on, and about 10 or 20% of the ones who lose end up making it to the UFC within the next year somehow or other. But it's usually someone who lost a real close fight or showed a ton of upside and steps in on short notice. None of that's the case here. And not only did Ross lose on the Contender Series, he got destroyed. If you can clue me in as to why he's in the UFC other than to get another Australian in the card, I'd love to hear it.
Well, he got knocked out. It was a fun fight before that. They both had moments, and they were going rock 'em, sock 'em. It was a really fun fight up until he got knocked out. But yeah, the knockout was brutal. And it was worst thing is they were like showing his family celebrating, and like his family was like, sorry, not celebrating, like watching, like cheering as he's coming out, and it was like little kids watching. It was terrible.
See that's why you just got to fight for the Rolex. Don't put the kids on
That's
there.
That's right. Fuck those kids.
That way, if like the Rolex guy loses, I can be like, oh, that asshole shouldn't have bought a Rolex, and I don't have to feel bad about it like his kid's crying. Yeah.
Yeah, just for the record, I'm only joking. I have nothing against the Ross family kids. No. I'm sure they're fine young lads. I think it's just right place, right time kind of thing. Shannon Ross, he's a minus athlete. He's pretty flat-footed. Excuse me. Bit of a stationary target. Doesn't move that much. He doesn't move to avoid strikes. He moves forward. He is an action fighter. He fights with some high volume. He uses a lot of feints to set up his shots. Quick hands, throws a lot of combinations. He kept winging the same overhand right, trying to end the fight on the Contender Series. I like that he works the body. He does have decent pop. He's got 6 knockouts. He likes flying knees. Like he was trying that, but you got to be worried about his chin. I mean, he was rocked. Like he wasn't just a knockout. He was rocked a bunch of times before he was finally put out flat in his last fight. So that's concerning. He will occasionally wrestle. He's not much of a submission. He only has 1 sub on his record, but his cardio is off the charts. Like he kept coming despite being hurt, and his volume was really good. So that's kind of what he has going here. Rodrigues is huge. Like he's huge for the weight class. He's very athletic, very I'd say extremely athletic. He has this capoeira background. He fights a bit like Yoel Romero, and like he lulls and then he explodes. He uses a lot of feints to set up his shots. He can throw 1 strike at a time, and that's because he telegraphs his shots. And he loads up and he tries to end the fight with 1 punch. I like that he does attack with everything, though. Like he has elbows and knees and kind of like that traditional, what they call like the 8 points. Like he has all 8 limbs, 8 points, whatever you want to call it, landing. Throws a lot of kicks. He likes kicks up the middle. He likes flying knees. He'll throw some spinning attacks, kind of, with that capoeira background. I like that he has this like John Jones style. And when he gets inside, he looks at these hard, close elbows where, he changes from punches to elbows. He avoids strikes by rolling to avoid stuff, which we've talked about in the past and what I would rank the scale. It's on the lower end of the scale when it comes defensively. Because of his height and his size, he can get in the clinch and grapple in there pretty strong. He does jump guillotine, which is concerning, but he almost got it, so I'll give him that. He lands some hard elbows in the clinch. He dives into takedowns though, which is not the prettiest thing. I wouldn't call him a wrestler at all. And he has 2 subs on his record, but he needs to improve his ground game. I mean, CJ Vergara mounted him twice, which is not a good look. And he faded really bad in his last fight. So I really want to take Ross. I do. I love his spirit. I think every minute that goes by, the longer the fight goes on, the more ground he's going to gain. But I hate going by the intangibles. Like I usually like to go by the skills. And Rodriguez is a more skilled fighter. So give me Rodriguez to win a split decision. I think he gets out to an early lead and has to hold on like a late surge from Ross as Ross gets stronger and stronger as the fight goes on, and Rodriguez just holds on. Give me Rodriguez by split decision.
Great. I love a bunch of the things you pointed out there and came to like similar or same conclusions in some cases. I love that you mentioned that Rodriguez is massive for the division and explosive. And the comparison to Yoel Romero, I love, because why did Yoel always fight that way? It was so that he'd still be throwing effective offense in the third or fifth round of a fight. He knew that he couldn't possibly fight at a furious pace with the kind of muscle he was carrying, especially as he pushed 40. So yeah, he'd wait, yeah, and then explode. And Rodriguez, has some of that. I mean,
remember when Yoel Romero fought, I think it was Phil Davis, and like all of a sudden he like lost, and instead of pretending he thought it was 5 rounds.
Yep, that was
so man. Fucking Euro.
What a source of unintentional comedy. Like he really
no. I
I
didn't believe it. Like that was the Tim Kennedy suddenly he didn't know he had to get off the off the chair and filling ice and shit. Like I love him.
The things about Ross, I mean, and I'm glad you mentioned the things you like about him, because as I kind of like watched the tape on him, I'm like, are we sure this guy isn't from Boston? Like he's got the very Irish sounding name, and he's what, Sherdog associate editor Jay Petrie loves to refer to as a Boston style face first striker, where you're like, no, he has movement. The movement's just to come forward.
Yeah, I let you say that. Like my neighbors across the street, their last name is Ross.
Yeah.
Dude, wait, his first name is Shannon.
Yeah.
Dude, my neighbor across the street's name is Shannon Ross. I swear to God. I swear to God.
See? And whenever you got a guy named Shannon, it's an Irish thing. It's like, yeah, I'm not sure that this guy isn't actually from the greater Boston area, but yeah, Boston style face first striker, like the classic Alex Karalexis mold where win or lose, he always just looks like he's been run over by a tractor at the end of his fights. Kleydson Rodriguez obviously has much more upside. The only question with him is how much longer he'll be for the 125-pound division period. I mean, we're talking, he's a big dude. But yeah, he got the short end of a wild fight against CJ Vergara, and I actually thought maybe he should have won that. But the problem for me is a future top 10 guy doesn't get into a fun fight with CJ Vergara. He just plunks CJ Vergara.
Yeah, exactly.
Like I ride or die with Texas, but CJ Vergara is a borderline UFC flyweight. Like if Kleydson Rodriguez is a serious future top 10 guy at 125 or 135, he plunks CJ Vergara in 6 or 7 minutes without a mark on him. So I know that Rodriguez is probably going to oblige Ross with at least chances to stay in this fight. If he can't put Ross away early, Ross is going to keep coming forward. He's going to throw volume. He's going to force the issue. I could see this being a close fight where Rodriguez has to hold on after maybe winning the first round or really decisively. All of a sudden he's tired and he has to hold on while Ross is piecing him up. And I'm not thinking we get like a draw situation where people are arguing over whether there's a 10-8 round, but maybe Ross in a losing performance shows that he has a place to stay in the UFC as well. And it was the right choice to sign him even after that like ugly loss on the Contender Series. Next up, it's back to the men's featherweight division for a matchup between Joshua Culibao and Melsik Baghdasaryan. Culibao, the 28-year-old Australian, is 10-1-1 overall. He's 2-1-1 since joining the UFC just about 3 years ago. He lost his debut to Jalen Turner, just got crushed. Had an exciting split draw fight against Charles Jourdain. Then he's won 2 in a row since then, a unanimous decision over Xia Yilan back in May of 2021, and a split decision win over Sungwoo Choi this past June at UFC 275. So Culibao looking to move past modest initial expectations and win 3 straight in one of the toughest divisions in the UFC. standing in his way will be Baghdasaryan, the 31-year-old from Southern California, Glendale, North Hollywood, Armenian American, 7-1 overall, 2-0 since joining the UFC out of the 2020 season of Dana White's Contender Series. He won his first 2 fights in the UFC, head kicked Colin Anglin and took a unanimous decision over Bruno Souza. That's great. The bad news is the most recent of those fights was the Souza fight was UFC 268 back in November of 2021. So he's back for the first time in 15 months, but he also will be looking for his 3rd straight win in the UFC. One of them's likely to get it here. They are dead even money. Culibao -110, Baghdasaryan -110. This one is a pick'em. Keith, we talked about Elise Reed earlier. I will be the first to admit that I underestimated Josh Culibao. He came to the UFC, and Jalen Turner at lightweight was a hell of a first. Because Culibao is not a small featherweight. He's kind of like a longer, lankier one.
Yeah.
Jalen Turner is a absolutely fucking gigantic lightweight. Just looked like 2 weight classes bigger than him, which he effectively was. I think I came to underestimate it after that. He has proven at least that he belongs. He's won 2 in a row. Shai Yilan and Sung Woo Choi are both kind of solid roster level guys. But I'm going to continue to underestimate Culibao here because I think Baghdasaryan is a terrible matchup for him. Culibao, he's still a very willing and aggressive striker. I think he's wild and has some defensive holes. And a guy like Baghdasaryan, who's a good kickboxer, who comes from a kickboxing background, unless the time off has really made him rust, unless he's lost something between ages 29 and 31, just barely turned 31 like a week ago, I think he evades Culibao's wild strikes and just plunks him. Just catches him with clean counters to his kicks, kicks his legs, kicks his body, kicks his head. Culibao belongs in the UFC. I don't think either of these guys is probably a future top 15 guy, but in terms of just the straight style matchup, I think Baghdasaryan is going to crush Culibao. Give me Melsik Baghdasaryan by 2nd round KO here.
Yeah. Culibao. We gotta find out if Culibao is single and find out if Elise Reed is single. Let's make that happen.
Even if they're not single, what happens in Australia stays in Australia.
That's true. You're in different time zones and stuff. Yeah, good call. When you go down under, you have to go down under. Josh Culibao, he's a minus athlete. He's a high output striker, bit of a pressure striker. He fights out of both stances. He uses a lot of movement, good volume, straight punches down the pipe. I'd say he's got some stinging power. That's actually the thing that I would underrate about him. Go back to the Charles Jourdain fight. He dropped him with a shot. He's got some hard body kicks. Doesn't check leg kicks though. He will sneak in the takedown, but he's a weak defensive wrestler. He struggles to get on bottom, and he isn't a submission threat at all. I don't think he has a single submission win. Baghdasaryan is an Armenian fighter who's got, you mentioned his kickboxing. He's got professional kickboxing experience, fought in K1, won a world championship in WLF, whatever that means. I don't know if I'm not a big kickboxing guy, but southpaw, I like his volume on the feet, really quick hands, really accurate. He's really good at getting to the point of contact, beating his opponents there. Really big power. He went on his 4-fight winning streak where his longest fight was 32 seconds. He was just starching guys. His left hand is deadly. Incredible high kick knockout over Colin Anglin. He showed that he has some cardio. He showed he's got some good takedown defense. Not much in the offensive grappling. You said this is a pick'em fight, and I'm utterly shocked by this. If you asked me what the betting line was for this fight, I would have said, I don't know, Baghdasaryan's gonna be a massive favorite.
Well, if I asked you who the biggest favorite on this card was, how long would it take you to get to Baghdasaryan?
He might have been my pick.
Yeah, I would have been like Tukhugov,
Tukhugov.
And then like Baghdasaryan. Yeah.
If you asked me to just set the line, I would have guessed just guessing. negative 375.
Yeah, I was like minus 400. I was stunned.
I'm actually stunned too.
I don't get it. Like,
the only thing I can think of is being that Don Shainis is in the building. There might be some funny business going on with James Krause. They're in another country. Like what is going on? Baghdasaryan gonna take one for the team. So I don't know. Like we said, this is not a betting show, but you guys want to I'm max bet this thing. Like what just to try to sound hip for the kids. Culibao better get this fight to the ground immediately. And I think he's smart enough to try. I really do. I just don't think he'll be able to get there. And I think Baghdasaryan's going to starch him. I think Baghdasaryan's going to knock him on the very first round. Okay. I think he's getting a $50,000 bonus. So maybe the guy with the Rolex will put his Rolex up and bet on it. I don't get this line. Like I think Baghdasaryan's going to style on him.
I'm glad that you vindicated that because I mean, I've said this on the show before. If I go first, on one of these predictions, it's either because I feel bad, like, cause you've already done like 5 in a row, or because I just have what seems to me to be a really obvious take on it. And anytime I do that, I'm like, I'm just waiting for Keith to come in and like explain why I'm wrong. So when you feel the same way I do, I'm like, oh, thank goodness. Yeah. Like,
it's gonna sound really bad when Culibao smashes him, but yeah, and Yanni the Greek bet on Culibao because of the cybermetrics thing he came up with, a graft of the weight class getting so many stoppages or some shit.
Dude, did you? I mean, you are watching through UFC Vegas 68 now. I don't know if you've gotten to Minty Bets, but like she's this woman that the UFC brought on, and she did a couple of just stand-up segments on Fight Odds.
Oh, really?
And she's
this is like the first show. Was that one?
Wait, the what?
Is it? I'm sorry. Was this? They've been bringing her on.
No, this was her first time.
Okay, so last night.
And her name is Minty Bets, and
okay, that's fantastic.
They I guess she's some sort of Instagram influencer, but
so she got to be hot.
Okay, I mean, real talk.
Yeah,
I mean, she's attractive and telegenic, but she's not drop dead gorgeous. Okay. Like the UFC's production is full of extremely attractive women who are very good at their job. I mean, they've got, Laura Sanko debuted. Megan Olivi is like the queen of the stand-up.
Yeah.
I mean, the UFC has no trouble.
But they're also extremely not. Both of those women are very good at what they do.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Like, Minty Bets is none of that. She is the worst. Like so-called gambling specialist they've ever had on. It became very obvious that she didn't understand what under 2.5 rounds means. She advocated a prop bet, and she didn't know that it literally means the midpoint of the round, not that it won't go to like the end. Like it was bad. And then she tried to explain herself on Twitter and just like was digging and digging and digging.
Wait a minute. And this was the UFC?
Yeah. She's on the UFC, I think 2 or 3 segments. You'll see it as you go along.
Let me get this right. You're the worldwide leader in sports. You're on ESPN. There's not a better person. Like, you have Ian Parker. Like, my boy Ian Parker does this.
You've got Nick Kalikas hanging around.
Nick Kalikas. Freaking put us on there. We don't bet, but like we can give some advice. Well, have James. You know what? Just own James Krause. Just have James Krause do it. Like, say fuck it. Like he's a fighter and he knows about gambling. We're just gonna own it.
Yeah, just call it work release for his prison term.
Yeah, like you can't coach anymore, but you can give out betting advice. Minty Bets,
Minty Bets. I can't wait for you to hit me back once you see Minty Bets, because
that's fantastic.
I mean, it's one thing to be Yanni the Greek and like have some bad streaks that maybe come from not doing enough research, and then there's just not even understanding how to read the prop bets. I couldn't believe it.
Yeah, wow. I hope she made the Bears list.
And yeah, and the chat was just hammering on her the whole time. But yeah, I mean,
I haven't watched yet, so I will watch throughout the week. So I usually watch like a fight here, a fight there, and then slowly by the end of the week, I've caught up. I was starting with Bellator. I was doing Bellator first, but Minty Bets, yeah, cool.
All right, you ready for Pedro versus Bukauskas?
Was that on the air? All that?
Oh yeah.
Okay.
I'm gonna leave it in. Like, yeah, dude.
Yeah. Okay. I didn't know if you
hit me, Minty.
Yeah. Well, fuck it.
Right. The top prelim at UFC 284 is a light heavyweight matchup between Tyson Pedro and Modestas Bukauskas. Pedro, the 31-year-old Australian, is 9-3 overall. He's 5-3 in the UFC. He is 2-0 since his return from a lengthy layoff. He was gone for 3.5 years, from December 2018 to April of 2022. Since coming back, he is 2-0 with first-round stoppages of Ike Villanueva and Harry Hunsucker. He'll look to make it 3 in a row against the returning Bukauskas. The 28-year-old Lithuanian, by way of the UK, is 13-5 overall. He is 1-3 in the UFC. Went 1-3 in the UFC. He won his debut back in 2020 over Andreas Michailidis, then lost 3 in a row to Jim Crute, Michal Oleksiejczuk, and Khalil Roundtree, at which point the UFC released him. He went back to Cage Warriors, where he had actually spent most of his career on the way up, won 2 fights there in 2022, and here he gets the call back to the UFC, stepping in on short notice in place of Minyang Zhang, who he was on the road to UFC series, but he was at light heavyweight, so he was outside of the actual tournament weight classes. The UFC was going to bring him in, but he's out, and Bukauskas is in. Perhaps owing to the short notice of the fight, perhaps owing to the fact that Bukauskas isn't that good, Pedro is a comfortable favorite here. He's minus 240, Bukauskas plus 200. Keith, we've been a little harsh on this card. We talked about how outside of the top fight, it's pretty rough sledding for a pay-per-view card. This as the top prelim, just neither of these guys is that good. The best I can say is that they're both relatively young, especially Bukauskas. So there's still potential upside, but Pedro never turned the corner. He never developed. When he got to the UFC, he was an impressive athlete who was able to pull off some pretty cool stuff on low-level fighters because he was an impressive athlete, but more schooled fighters just embarrassed him. Like, he couldn't put away Ilir Latifi, so Ilir Latifi just outlasted him. Yeah. Like, when you get outgassed by Ilir Latifi, that's 205, that's not good.
Shogun. Shogun was another one.
Dude, was he Shogun's last clean win? Yeah. That's not a distinction you want to carry. And when he did kind of his wild do anything on the ground thing that served him well in Australia, Ovince St. Preux destroyed him, because Ovince St. Preux is the king of opportunistic. Oh, you want to roll around and see what happens? I'm gonna Kimura you. Since he's been back, he has easy wins over Ike Villanueva and Harry Hunsucker. And
Ben, sorry to interrupt you. No, that's not. Little Nog was Shogun's last one.
Okay, thank you.
So I apologize for saying yes. But you did ask clean win. Like, what are you trying to suggest here, Ben?
I just wanted to make sure there wasn't some weird disqualification or something. Speaking nothing about the Pride vitamins. No. God, like, if he was on the juice, you'd think he'd look to be in a little better shape. But since Pedro's been back, he's gotten easy wins over Ike Villanueva and Harry Hunsucker. And again, Ike Villanueva, I like the guy. I know his kids. That he
are they better than Shannon Ross's kids?
They're older. Okay. Probably less prone to, getting real upset if dad loses.
Not 28 yet, though. They're not. No. They're not that terrible stage in life.
But Ike Villanueva and Harry Hunsucker, they were probably the 2 worst light heavyweights in the UFC at the time Pedro beat them. So all we know is that Pedro is not the worst light heavyweight in the UFC. And they were bringing in Minyang Zhang to fight him. That was a setup fight. Zhang was terrible. Like, I would have punched the max bet on Pedro all day over Minyang Zhang. He is not a good fighter. Here, they're doing the next best thing. Bringing Modestas Bukauskas back is, it's the next best thing to giving Pedro a walkover. Like, the UFC seems really motivated to get Pedro over. Maybe they see kind of a light heavyweight Tai Tuivasa in him. Just this really charismatic, jovial guy that drinks beer out of shoes, and they think they can make a sort of niche star out of him if he can win enough to stay in the UFC. Because they can't possibly see top 10 upside in him, even at light heavyweight. He's 31, and he's the same fighter he was when he was 27. But against Bukauskas, his thing might work. I mean, my knock on Bukauskas always has been he's a long, lengthy kickboxer who doesn't have the footwork or athleticism to keep people off him that want to crowd him and mash him. To be fair to Bukauskas, I thought he should have beaten Michal Oleksiejczuk, but like Roundtree and Crute both bullied him. And that's something Pedro could do. Pedro could just crash the pocket on Bukauskas, find a takedown somewhere, or just mug him in close quarters. And that's kind of what I'm expecting to happen here. Like, I don't think Bukauskas is ever going to be comfortable with the range here. And unless he snipes Pedro coming in with just like a real clean counter, or gets enough time to work to really start chopping at his legs and pay dividends later, I think Bukauskas is going to lose here. Just either a decision where he never gets the fight into his preferred range, maybe spends time on the ground he doesn't want to, or Pedro actually finds a finish on the ground. I'm going to go with the decision here. Give me Pedro to win rounds 1 and 2, maybe have to hold on in round 3 as he's the more tired guy, but still gets a pretty straightforward win.
Yeah. This fight sucks. I'm not high on either guy. Pedro's big for the weight class. Every time I see him, I always think he's a heavyweight. He's such a big dude. I'd say he's a plus athlete. Like I agree with like I think you're saying that he wins by being a better athlete than his opponents. He moves well. He does keep his chin too high in the air for me. I don't like that. He can back straight up on the center line. Another thing I don't like. He does use feints to draw out attacks well because he wants to counter strike. He does throw straight shots down the pipe, which I like. He can be gun shy at times, which is concerning. Strong leg kicks. You go back to, like you mentioned, Ike Villanueva, he busted up leg kicks. He will wrestle, but he's not great at it. I think he's a weak defense wrestler. I mean, he got wrestled by Shogun. Like, that should tell you everything. And not young Shogun.
No,
like 40 years old Shogun. Like young Shogun wasn't a good wrestler. Never mind 40-year-old Shogun.
Shogun on his original knees wasn't that great a wrestler. Yeah.
No. He was no Bo Nickel.
Ding, ding, ding.
He does struggle to get off the bottom, which is concerning. He has a submission threat, though. He has 5 subs on his record, but he gassed out bad against Shogun. But he's back in the UFC, hopefully more motivated. We've seen guys fix glaring weaknesses. Maybe I don't know what the glaring weaknesses are, Pedro, but maybe he's fixed some of them. Bukauskas, he's won 2 fights since he's got cut from the UFC. He's back in the UFC. Fights out of both stances. I actually prefer him from the southpaw stance, though. I think he moves well. He's a bit of an outfighter. He doesn't like being pressured. He wants to work from distance. Quick hands. Throws, again, another guy throws basic straight shots. He also can be gun-shy. You look at his last fight. Oh, God, who is he going against? What's his first name? Hadwick? He's been around forever. You know what I'm talking about. Lee Hadwick, right? That's his name, right?
Hardwick.
I'm sorry. Hardwick. Sorry. Yeah. It's like he was gun shy at times in that fight. A lot of spinning attacks. A lot of like.
If I look like I'm not responding, it's because like you dropped out a couple times for me.
Oh, okay. Sorry. A lot of. Hopefully, it was when I was messing up that guy's name. A lot of spinning attacks.
Lee Chadwick.
I'm sorry. Yeah. Guys, I mean, come on. You're talking about like the ultimate journeyman. Like, I'm sorry. I've seen him fight like 30 times too. This shows you how memorable he is. Hard body kicks, good calf kicks. As you mentioned, though, he's a weak defensive wrestler. But to his credit, he does well to get back up to his feet. He does defend takedowns by landing like elbows. He likes the downward Travis Brown elbows. But I'm worried about his chin. I mean, you go back to his last UFC fight, he was knocked out by Jim Crute. Cardio is good. He's fought championship rounds. So I think Chadwick was maybe 2 fights ago. In his last fight, he got a 4th-round stoppage. I really want to pick Pedro, but I'm not very high on him. But Bukauskas is, as you mentioned, a very low-level talent too. You seem more like neither one of us seem high on either guy, but you seem a little bit more confident on Pedro. I'm not that confident. I'm really on the fence. Like, I will go with Pedro. I think, being his home crowd, the crowd rocking, put a little pressure on his opponent. So again, give me Pedro by decision in a really ugly fight that I have no confidence in.
The 5-fight main card of UFC 284 kicks off with a 205-pound matchup between Jimmy Crute and Alonzo Menifield. Crute, the 26-year-old Australian, is 12-3 overall. He is 4-3 since joining the UFC out of the second season of Dana White's Contender Series. He is currently on a 2-fight losing streak, however. Back in April of 2021, he had a doctor stoppage TKO at the end of the first round against Anthony Smith when his leg basically gave out on him. Then came back in December of that year and got knocked out by Jamal Hill in just 48 seconds. Though, in fairness to Crute, that loss has aged pretty well, as Hill has just turned into the kind of guy that does that to people. Since then, after a full year and change off, he comes back looking to stem the bleeding against Menifield. The 35-year-old Texas native is 13-3 overall. He is 6-3 since joining the UFC as a 2-time winner on the Contender Series. He won on the first season, taking out Daniel Jolly with a doctor stoppage between rounds. Came back on the second season, knocked out Deshaun Boatwright in just 8 seconds. That finally punched his ticket to the big show, where, as mentioned, he is 6-3 since then. He's on a 2-fight win streak, those being last June, dealing out some cosmic justice to Askar Mozharov for, offending the Sherdog Fight Finder, and then coming back in October and knocking out Misha Serkinov in just 1 minute and 28 seconds. So he'll be looking to make it 3 in a row, just as Crute hopes not to make it 3 in a row. Crute is the moderate favorite here. He's minus 210. Menifield plus 180. Keith, I'll kick this one to you. Crute is one of those guys where I'm like, really? Is he still just 26 years old? Like, that is just wild to me. There is almost.
Yeah, I agree. I think he's like 31 or something.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Like, he's 26 years old. Menifield 35, but I mean, physically seems to have shown no slippage. I mean, his losses are not because he's physically shot. How do you see this one going?
Yeah, this is a tough one. What'd you say the odds were?
Crute minus 210, Menifield plus 180.
Yeah, I can't believe this fight is that big of a margin, but the
Culibao versus Baghdasaryan is a pick'em.
What's her name there?
Minty Bets?
Is she making these lines? Is that what's going on?
Or is it Minty Picks? Is it Minty Picks or Minty Bets? I can't remember.
It's Minty Bets. I just looked it up. By the way, Ben, you're talking about, you have much higher standards than I do, apparently. And you're like, oh, she's not that good looking. No,
I didn't say that. Like I said, she is an attractive, intelligent woman.
I mean, listen, not, Ben, not everyone can look as, stunning as you are all the time. That's why our ratings go through the roof, when we get the video going. Where were we? Jimmy Crute. We're right off the rails. It's on this one. Jimmy Crute, he's a plus athlete. I like that. I like that he likes to get down in the pocket. Due to his youth, he kind of has this fearless style and with his power. Though his last fight, Jamal Hill crushed his chin, so that might change a little bit. But in fairness, that loss obviously aged extremely well as now Hill is the champion. If he stays control, he's good pocket boxer. Kicks are a great part of his game. Best part of his striking, I'd say. Good volume with kicks, sneaky high kick, like push kicks, teep kicks up the middle. Good wrestler, good timing on his entries. I'd say he's a much better grappler than he is a striker, but I think his striking's come along a little bit. He's very good at winning scrambles. I always talked about he follows the hip. He's good at winning the head battle, cutting the corner. Just the little things that make a good wrestler. He does those well. He likes to advance position on the ground. He's got some strong ground and pound. And again, you made this point. He's 26. So while we've written him off, this is like the time he should be making his UFC debut. So that can be like a two-edged sword. Like, it's really good that you're only 26, but has his confidence been killed? Has he taken unnecessary early punishment? Like, it goes both ways. We've seen guys who are 26 now, they turn around, and we see other guys that just never pans out. Menifield, very similar, great athlete, pretty elusive, fights behind guard. He can be gun shy a little bit, and I shouldn't say gun shy like he's tentative to engage. It's more if he's pacing himself, because he throws a lot of single strikes trying to land the perfect blow and the fight. He telegraphs a little bit, loading up on his shots and everything. I mentioned this before. He can overthrow his shots, which leaves him open to be countered. But if he lands, he's got some really good power. I mean, he showed it against Misha Serkinov if he connects. Going back to the OSP fight, that's the one I thought was his worst performance. He really struggled to get inside. A guy, because of a length, and not that OSP is this massive guy for the weight class, but he struggled to get inside. That's probably it. He tends to fight in spurts, and again, that's because he has to conserve his energy. I like his kicking game. Strong calf kicks, quick high kick. A weak grappler, but he's shown improvements. Like, he showed improved takedown defense against Devin Clark, against Misha Serkinov, and his gas tank has improved again because I think he's matured and he's got wiser. If you asked me 1 year ago, I would have picked Crute easily. I'm like, there's no brainer, Crute's going to win this one. But based on the improved takedown defense, based on the elite power of Menifield and Crute's chin, I think this is the fight that should be a pick'em. I'm still going to go with Crute. If Menifield stops takedowns from Crute too, who might on paper might not be as good of a wrestler on paper as Misha Serkinov and Devin Clark, but I think he's craftier in MMA. He hides it better in MMA. If he can stop takedowns from Crute, then I'm officially going to believe in his takedown defense. Crute is the better grappler. I see he finds ways to get the fight there. Give me Crute by decision, but not a 2-1 favorite in my opinion. I think it should be a pick'em.
Yeah, I feel a lot of the same things you do about this one, and there's always the question of, yeah, Crute is 26. Well, I mean, he turns 27 in March, but still, like, really young, especially in the light heavyweight division where you can still compete at a high level. I mean, even leaving aside the Glover Teixeiras of the world, 37 is not old. Like, even if it was about to turn 37, not 27, 37 isn't old for light heavyweight. He should be improving. You can argue that he maybe isn't even at his full power yet as a striker, but then he's been gone for 15 months, and it's after a weird, freakish ankle injury and then a bad knockout. And I mean, the way he'll put him away.
Yeah, I forgot about that ankle. That's a good point.
Like, head kicked him, then put him down with just this massive right hand, and then dove in and gave him like a standing to ground coffin nail that left him like stiff, like Tank Abbott, John Matua shit. 15 months after that, I'm not as confident that he's a better fighter now. Certainly not as confident and willing to engage as he was. And you're right. Like, Menifield's been incrementally improving. I didn't completely write him off, but I sort of put him in one category after the Clark fight. I don't feel as bad about the OSP fight, because as long as OSP's on two legs, he's going to get some freakish knockouts and some freakish submissions. But the Clark fight, where Clark just outlasted him and outgassed him and outhustled him, that's not aged well, considering that Devin Clark has turned into such a inconsistent and kind of head casey fighter. But since then, Menifield has looked solid. I mean, he didn't look great against Knight, but I thought he won that fight. Like, in my book, Menifield should be on a 5-fight win streak right now. And if he were, he'd probably be taking on a top 10 opponent this month instead of like the returning Crute. I like that you mentioned Menifield's arsenal of kicks. I have found myself thinking over and over again that if he threw more leg kicks, it would stand him in good stead. There's such a weapon for him. His leg kicks are so hard and hard to counter. Like he's good at not throwing him naked. He's good at keeping his guard up while he does it. I wish he'd throw more of them. Like just 6 or 10 of those in the first round of each of his fights would make all those fights look really different. I don't know if this is the fight where he gets started on that, but I'm gonna go with the upset here, just because of Menifield's steady improvement, because of Crute being more of an unknown quantity. I'm going to say Menifield at least keeps this thing standing enough to win 2 rounds off of Crute. So give me Menifield to get easily the best win of this 3-fight win streak. And yeah, maybe jump up into the rankings here.
Yeah, if he wins, I think we'd be matchmaking him probably.
Yep, for sure. I mean, who else are we going to matchmake on this main card?
Yeah, good point.
Because the rest of the main card, it either doesn't matter or they're really obvious.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I wonder who Josh Emmett and Yair Rodriguez should fight next.
Next up on the UFC 284 main card, we get to the obligatory unranked heavyweight slobber knocker. And this one is about as unranked as they get. It is Justin Tafa versus Parker Porter. Tafa, the 29-year-old Australian, is 5-3 overall. He's 2-3 in the UFC. He has not fought in a little over a year, but his last win was a first-round head kick knockout of Harry Hunsucker back at UFC Fight Night Lewis versus Dawkins. That was December of 2021. Prior to that, he had lost back-to-back fights to Carlos Felipe and Jared Vanderaa. He'll look to make it 2 wins in a row against Porter. The 37-year-old Connecticut native is 12-7 overall. He's 3-2 in the UFC. He lost his last time out. It was a first-round submission loss to Jailton Almeida last May. Prior to that, he had won 3 in a row over Josh Parisian, Chase Sherman, and Alan Bodell. All of that after his debut loss to Chris Dawkins back in 2020. Odds on this one, fairly close, but Tafa is the slight favorite. He's minus 140, Porter plus 120. Keith, this is, I said during the intro, and I'm going to stick with it, this is the worst fight you can make in the UFC heavyweight division between 2 people who haven't fought each other yet. I mean, Justin Tafa is 2-3 in the UFC. His wins are over Harry Hunsucker and Juan Adams. His losses are... This guy has lost to Yorgan De Castro and Jared Vanderaa, and he is fighting on a UFC main card in 2023.
Yeah.
Parker Porter, yeah, he won 3 in a row, but it was Josh Parisian, Chase Sherman, and Alan Bodell. Like the two good UFC heavyweights that Porter has fought have destroyed him. Jailton Almeida destroyed him. Chris Dawkins destroyed him. And that was before Chris Dawkins really had his little, like, I'm good at fighting phase. This was like bad, flabby Chris Dawkins, like, outstruck Porter badly. Tafa, dude, his wins are over Harry Hunsucker and Juan Adams. He has lost to Yorgan De Castro and Jared Vanderaa. This, I don't even know how to elaborate on it. I mean, this was a not last minute matchup, but fairly short notice. Tafa was supposed to take on Austin Lane, which, I mean, that wouldn't have been that much of an upgrade. We're talking about a guy who got plunked by Greg Hardy on the Contender Series a couple years ago. Yeah. But this is rough. I mean, it pays off. Like, the UFC's gamble here pays off if we get just a nasty knockout in the first round. If we don't get a nasty knockout in the first round, this thing settles down to a slog. Tafa's fights that have gone the distance have been rough viewing, and Porter's 3 wins in a row were all by decision, and they were not appointment viewing either. I'm a little surprised that Tafa's the favorite here. Porter has at least fought the better fighters.
He fought John Jones. That's
true. He did fight John Jones. Like, he...
Hey, if I saw someone tweet this, if Parker Porter if John Jones can win the title and Parker Porter go on like a 7-fight win streak, he can get the rematch.
Jones versus Porter too, for all the marbles, and then we'd have to have a trilogy.
That's yeah.
I mean, each of these guys has something they do better than the other. Like, Porter's got pretty good leg kicks. Tafa has more one-shot power in his hands. I mean,
Yeah.
Porter, for a guy that is built like just a circus strongman, like he's just built like a barrel. He's not that hard a hitter with his punches.
Yeah, like his training is like he's got a plane tied up to his teeth and he's walking like 100 yards.
You know, Tafa definitely a harder puncher, but I think this fight should probably be about a pick'em. I'm actually leaning Porter here because I think this thing is going 3 rounds, and Porter has shown that at the deliberate pace he likes to fight, he is still effective in the 3rd round of a fight. So give me Porter to chip away with leg kicks, probably win some sloppy, or at least hold his own in some sloppy clinch battles, not get lamped with a big overhand right, and win 2 rounds out of 3 and walk away with the decision.
You ever see those like strongman competitions with like those big balls they pick up?
And they have to set them up on the thing? Yeah. Oh, yeah, absolutely.
You think Parker Porter's ever picked up one of those?
Probably.
It just seemed like that'd be part of his training somehow. Yeah. Like, oh God, I feel like this is like the Bill and Ted's movie, like the 3rd movie. What I mean by that is, like, I saw Bill and Ted's number 2. I don't know the name of that one.
Longest Journey was the 2nd one.
Yeah, that was like the worst movie I've ever seen in my life. And then like 20 years later, they have a 3rd one. And I'm like, you can't get any worse than the 2nd one. And you watch it, and you're like, you should have known. Like, this is that you should have known to the UFC. Like, Bill and Ted's. I'd rather talk about Bill and Ted number 3, whatever name of that movie. That was the worst movie I've ever seen in my entire life. Oh, what was that? It's right up there with that. I don't want to say the name because I don't want to get shut off. But that, what was it? Was that Space Odyssey 2001?
2001, yeah.
Oh my God, that
Bill
terrible.
and Ted Face the Music.
Oh my God, it's the worst movie I've ever seen. It's right up there. I don't know what's worse. Somehow they should combine them. That's how I feel this fight is. Like UFC, you know how bad this is going to be, and then you put it on the main card. Like you actually, people paying like if what's it, $75? That's right, $75 pay per view. So you break it up into 5 fights. So you say, you know, this is like you're paying like $14. You know, or $15. You're paying $15 to watch Parker Porter and Justin Tafa fight each other. Tafa's a huge heavyweight. I mean, he's a huge guy. He's a southpaw, very boxing style. Quick hands. He loves throwing an uppercut. Definitely plus power. He landed a beautifully timed high kick against Harry Hunsucker last fight. Like his last fight was exciting. Mm-hmm. But he has like a lot of decent defensive flaws. He lacks head movement. He likes to just duck under his forearms. He can be too aggressive, leaving open the counters like he did against Jorgen De Castro. We haven't seen much of his ground game. In fairness, in his last fight, he did sprawl and spin behind Harry Hunsucker in the match. So that was like he understands the basic, moves you teach 6-year-olds in wrestling. But he almost got submitted by Harry Hunsucker. So,
hey, Harry Hunsucker is the origin of the Kentucky Judo Federation meme. I mean,
that's true. That's true. Parker Porter, minus athlete, also a massive dude. Like he's the biggest legs I've ever seen. I've described him as just lumbering, plodding guy. He's slow, but he is gritty. He'll march forward, throwing basic combinations. Wing and overhand right. He does have some power. He has, I mean, you look at his legs, he has strong leg kicks, also has defensive flaws, keeps his head straight up. I've talked about this before. His chin is high. I shouldn't say head sharp. His chin is high, but he dips to the same side over and over again. Where someone really like Mirko Krokop would have just high kicked him into oblivion. He does what Kamaru Usman did against Leon Edwards, where he like always dip into the left, and Leon Edwards got him to go that way and threw the high kick. Like it's someone's got to kick his head off. He just tries to walk through shots. He doesn't try to avoid them. He also constantly makes the mistake of trying to, and I've said this before, about even the score. If he gets hit, he's trying to tag you one hard back, which leaves him open. He is an okay wrestler. He took Alan Badeau down. He took Chase Sherman down, Josh Parisian down. So he's taken down. I mean, not the you know, not Cael Sanderson over here, but you know, he did take Alan Bordeaux down. He has 3 submissions on his record, even though he's been fighting for 100 years now. I've already talked way too much about this fight. I'm going New England. Give me Parker Porter by decision.
Hey, there you go. Your lone, at least so far, unanimous upset pick of this edition of the Shillen and Duffy Show.
The fight's so bad,
dude.
I was trying to add some nonsense, and I don't know if the Bill and Ted thing was good. It was.
I think it was pretty good.
Okay.
Porter's first fight in the UFC, the Dawkins fight, that was one of the first ones we previewed together. Like that was back when you were still doing it on like the Loudmouth SoundCloud page, and we would just embed them on, like it was you, me, and Feely all did it together.
Yep.
Like, and I just remember you being like, dude, Parker Porter sucks. He's not gonna. Like, I just think it's funny that he's still in the UFC. Almost 3 years later. I mean, good on him, dude. Like, I'm sure.
Yeah. Like he's a nice dude. He's the ultimate journeyman. Like, I'm glad that he can call himself a UFC veteran. And now that he's got wins. A
6-fight UFC veteran. He's 3-2 in the UFC. We're picking him to be 4 in the UFC. You know that he will make more on Saturday than he had made in his entire pre-UFC career, because you know he was fighting for like $800.
Oh, God. Oh, not even. I don't think he's gonna make that much. What was it? Joe Giannetti said he made $50 in ticket sales fighting. Or was it 25? It was something like stupid. Like, oh, they give me $25, but I get a portion of the ticket sales. And because they're on UFC Fight Pass, it gives me attention or something. I'm like, come on,
exposure. Dude. Oh yeah, you're working for exposure, huh?
Yeah, like
rough, man. Third from the top at UFC 284 is a welterweight matchup between Jack Della Maddalena and Randy Brown. Della Maddalena, the 26-year-old Australian, fighting in his hometown. He's actually from Perth, where my sister lives. He's 13-2 overall. He's 3-0 since joining the UFC out of the 2021 season of Dana White's Contender Series. All 3 of his wins, first-round knockouts. He knocked out Pete Rodriguez last January. Came back in June, knocked out Ramazan Amaev. And in November at UFC Fight Night, Zechiku versus Culibao, he knocked out Danny Hot Chocolate Roberts. Going to look to make it 4 wins in a row and really paint himself as someone to reckon with in the UFC welterweight division. Standing in his way is Brown, and standing over him is Brown. The 32-year-old Jamaican American is 16-4 overall. He's 10-4 in the UFC. Had mixed results in the early going, but he is currently on a 4-fight win streak. Starting back in April of 2021, he has a first-round submission of Alex Oliveira, and then unanimous decision win over Jared Gooden, a split decision win over Chaos Williams at UFC 274 last May, and most recently, back in October at UFC Fight Night, Dern versus Jan, he has a unanimous decision win over Francisco Trinaldo. So one man looking for his 4th straight UFC win, the other looking for his 5th straight. Something's got to give. The odds makers say that Brown's going to be the one to get the streak snapped. Della Maddalena, a strong favorite, minus 325, Brown plus 270.
Oh, it's big.
Yeah. Keith, give me your take on this fight. I know from my standpoint, I'm surprised at how well positioned both these guys are in the UFC welterweight division right now. But let me know if you agree and who you think wins this one.
Yeah, it's definitely one of the I always think of the UFC as like the depth of the range of the best is usually 135 to 170. Like those are your toughest divisions. And for both these guys to kind of be on the runs there are in this division and kind of being on the outside of the top 15 is impressive. This is a good matchup. This really is. I kind of dogged the UFC when I said this, the main card sucks. But again, if you add in Robert Whittaker and Paulo Costa as they planned, and then Alex Perez and Kai Kara France, add those 2 with the 3 fights we have left to predict, it's a solid main card. And this fight is right up there. This is 2 really good talents. Brady Brown, he's got a lot of experience. Been in UFC for a while. He's extremely big for the weight class, tall, long and lengthy, moves well. He's an outfighter that, he knows he has to work behind his long jab, a bit of an up jab. He kind of hangs his hands a little low for my liking, but he's got quick hands, very good kicking game. Because he has these long legs, he is open to calf kicks and big targets. I go back to like Vicente Luque dropped him with leg kicks. But I like that he understands it's either all the way out or all the way in. He's not going to pocket box with you. If you get inside, he's going to start looking for plum clinch. Due to his height, he gets good knees, good elbows. He will wrestle a little bit. Very Michael Chiesa, long arm style, likes upper body locks. We can kind of use that like tall man strength. He needs to improve his overall top game, like his controlling, but he has 4 submission wins. And he's shown an ability that he's hard to hold down. Like Gilbert Burns or someone like that, Kamaru Usman would, but without being the elite of the division, like he's hard to hold down. Jack Maddalena, I love this kid. Everybody loves this kid. He is the absolute sniper on the feet. Dangerous from both stances. He's your builder. He picks up the pace as the fight moves on, and that's because he's setting traps. He's learning. Short, tight shots, not a lot of tells, very accurate, elusive, good footwork, good at cutting angles. I love that he works the body, really good vision to avoid shots. He's hard to hit. When he gets in close, I love that he looks for elbows. He's got good power, and he hasn't really even come into his power years, and he already has 10 knockouts. He is open to leg kicks because he's heavy on his front foot. That's probably the only thing about he doesn't check leg kicks. But he's so accurate. If you want to throw a leg kick, you better disguise it well because he's going to counter it with something good. He has a judo background. He will shoot for some takedowns without sending them, so I don't like that. But he's good at winning scrambles. Very funky style wrestler. I've seen him in scrambles throwing out like Granby rolls and stuff, and he's hard to take down. I'm all in on Maddalena. This is a step up in competition. When you go over the guys he's fought compared to now Randy Brown, like this definitely is a step up for him. But I think he passes it with flying colors. I think he gets right in the mix. I think he gets in Brown's face, tags him. He's too fast for him, too accurate. Like, again, getting past the leg kicks, the long legs, I should say more. It's going to be a little tough. And the jab. Brown's really tough, so I think he makes the second, but I think Maddalena's just going to overwhelm him. I think he's going to land power shots, maybe throw him in a judo throw, but I like the stand-up. I think he makes it, even though Brown will try to close the pocket, and Brown's best bet was probably maybe getting the clinch, trying to land those knees, but I think Maddalena's going to be too fast. I think Maddalena's going to knock him out. Give me Maddalena by second round knockout.
Yeah, I'm with you here that this is it's a big step up in competition for Della Maddalena. It isn't for Brown. Like, Brown has already fought some of the best that the division has to offer. Aside from his weird early loss to Michael Graves, like Bilal Muhammad, Nico Price, Vicente Luque, all very good fighters. All, kind of even Price, on the right night is like a top 15 quality guy, just in terms of what he brings offensively. And then Luque and Muhammad just literally have been in the top 10. So this will be a fight that if Maddalena wins convincingly, he will have proven something. He puts himself in some pretty select company, and he has a definite route to victory that you've kind of described. Get inside of Brown's preferred range and do his damage there, and not let Brown do the all the way out, all the way in thing. Like, so it's not going to be an easy task. He might make it look easy, but on paper, it's a challenging thing to do. It's something that not a whole lot of people have done to Brown. And there are other question marks. You mentioned that Brown is a sneaky good offensive wrestler. Like, he doesn't usually look to do it, but he can, and he's surprisingly effective at it. And none of Jack Della Maddalena's UFC opponents have even been in there with him long enough to really test his defensive wrestling or his ground game. But you go back to his appearance on the Contender Series back in late 2021, Angelusa got on top of Della Maddalena in a scramble, actually got all the way to side control before Della Maddalena just kind of on sheer athleticism just kind of like popped up and out of there. But for someone like Brown that's like sneaky good with submissions, has just tricky long arms and legs, which is why he's got like guillotines and triangles. Like there's plenty of danger here for Jack Della Maddalena. So I'm with you. Like, obviously the bulk of our conversation Saturday night's going to be devoted to whatever happens in the main event, since like the co-main is pretty cut and dried, like what the stakes are. But if Jack Della Maddalena knocks it out of the park here, like he's going to get the lion's share of the rest of the talk. And I'm with you. I think he gets it done. Give me Della Maddalena to win a lopsided decision here that leaves no doubt. And I almost hope that he's able to navigate some of the threats that Brown can pose to him, just and answer that many more questions about himself as a guy that's just 26 years old and is all of a sudden a new person of interest in this division. With that, we come to the co-main event of UFC 284, a featherweight title matchup between Yair Rodriguez and Josh Emmett. Rodriguez, the 30-year-old Mexican, is 14-3 with 1 no contest overall. He is 9-2 with 1 no contest in the UFC. He won his last time out. He was in the midst of a competitive first round against Brian Ortega when Ortega's shoulder all of a sudden basically came out of the socket, wouldn't go back in. The thing was over late in the first round and everybody was frustrated. Prior to that, he had lost a fairly competitive decision to former champ Max Holloway. That was in the headliner of UFC Fight Night 197 back in November of 2021. He's going to look to pick up a belt here at the expense of perennial contender Emmett. The 37-year-old Californian is 18-2 overall. He is 9-2 in the UFC. He is on a 5-fight win streak since his February 2018 loss to Jeremy Stevens. He has beaten Michael Johnson, Mirsad Bektic, Shane Burgos, Dan Ige, and Calvin Kattar. The most recent of those, the Kattar win, was a split decision in the headliner of UFC on ESPN 37 back in June. Odds favor Rodriguez. He is minus 165, Emmett plus 140. Keith, these guys have a ton of differences. Like their skill sets, their body types, about as different as you can get.
Yeah. Personalities, everything. Yeah.
Personalities. One thing they have in common is that these guys don't fight often enough.
Yeah.
I mean, almost the only thing, especially Rodriguez, but like at the same time, Emmett is just like a combination of just fighting like twice a year, getting the occasional injury and 1 or 2 inopportune losses. I mean, there's every chance that he would have had a title shot by now, you know, if he'd just been a little healthier and a little busier. Sure. I mean, he fought not at all in 2020 and then he fought once a year in 2020, 2021, and 2022. You know, that's just not.
Yeah, there's a couple other factors that hurt him. One is just the killer division.
Yeah.
And then another thing is his personality. Like he's just your, I think he's just your average guy. Like I don't think he's got a bad personality. He's just your average guy. He's not flashy. He doesn't talk a big game. Yeah, he tried talking a little bit more and this and that, but that's not him. Yeah,
it just kind of falls flat. And
he's just your all-American wrestler kind of, you know.
And he's been against guys that is hard to do that to, like Kattar, Ige, Shane Burgos. They're all just kind of.
Yeah, that's a good point. Like guys that don't really draw it out of them. Yeah. You know,
you're going to get a lot of press conferences that say, you know, I really respect him. He's a tough guy, but I just got to impose my game plan and just.
Rodriguez might. I mean, he's got.
No, Rodriguez. Yeah. I mean,
he's the guy that he'll talk a little bit. I mean, but. Even he's not. I want to say he's a trash target. He's more of like just like flashier, you know. Mm-hmm. He'll probably wear sunglasses at the press conference indoors, which always drives me crazy, you know. So, yeah.
But is Yair Rodriguez getting one of the least deserved UFC title shots in recent years?
But how many fight winning streak is down?
1, and it was a freakish injury.
Yeah.
Prior to that, he lost to Holloway. Before that, I mean, he beat
he got
Jeremy
trashed by Holloway.
and then he had the 2-fight series with Jeremy Stevens, but that was 2019, dude. In the last
when
3
you think
years,
about,
he's 1-1.
Yeah, when you think about the three guys that were kind of in the running, him, Emmett, and Arnold Allen, like who's the guy that could be left out? It was Arnold Allen was the guy. You could make the argument that Rodriguez should be the one who was left out, but it was kind of that thing where you have like markability versus how much well deserved you are, and Emmett was the highest guy who's kind of, I wouldn't say he doesn't have the markability, but if you go just straight on merit, he probably deserves it most.
Right. And then Allen's personality is even drier than Emmett's.
Yeah, and I don't know. It's like you have two guys that are going off of merit. You go with the guy that's higher ranked, beating the higher ranked guys. Go with him for that, and then Rodriguez, you need somebody to kind of get over Mexico and all that. So, but yeah, to answer your question, it is. I don't know if it's the most least deserving one, but it's in the category.
Yeah, it's in there, man. He's 1-1 in the last 3 years.
Yeah,
and the one win was a weird injury.
And of course, we're talking about like modern. We're not talking
modern.
about
We're not talking about Aaron Brink or or
like
Wayne Tello or something.
Yeah, when Justin Eiler's got a title shot, even though he got knocked out the fight before, just
sorry, not Aaron Brink. I mean Justin Eilers.
Yeah. But if you if you want to say from a certain point where
post tough era,
post tough or I mean, you could argue that Matt Serra didn't deserve his title shot, but I mean, it's definitely up there.
But just
and it also has to give the guys like the Brock Lesnar again. That's a whole different category.
Sure.
Like they're those people who jump the line over everybody is a little different. But Rodriguez. That said, he is an elite talent.
And he's favored. I mean, you can't judge these things based solely on the result, but enough people think he's going to get it done that he's minus 165. So,
well, I'm really surprised by that. I would have guessed that. If you asked me what the betting odds, I would have said like negative 125 favorite most, and I wouldn't even know the guess who was going to be the favorite. Like, I think this is, if you ask me what's the one fight should be the closest, I would have said probably this one. Now, I'm not going to pick that way.
Yeah.
Okay. Like, I'm actually pretty confident in my pick for one of the fighters, but just guessing what the odds would have been. Like, I think if you got 100 people in a room and say who's going to win, I think it'd be 50 people saying Rodriguez, 50 people saying Emmett. Yeah. You want me to start breaking it down?
Yeah. I mean, just tell me, is Emmett going to find the halflings,
Yeah, Josh Emmett and Yair Rodriguez. Let me ask you this: the UFC wants Yair to win, correct?
Oh, hell yes, yes. I mean, they want champs that are exciting in the cage and exciting on the mic, not necessarily in that order.
And he's younger.
He's younger. If he ever gets his shoes tied right, he would presumably be like more of an active champ than Emmett would be. Because Emmett's going to fight once per year for the rest of his career, however long that is, and it's probably not more than another 2 years.
Yeah. And again, the way they fight too. I mean, Rodriguez. I mean, he's exciting. He's all about his athleticism. He's one of the best athletes in the entire sport. I mean,
which guy would you be more excited to see Volkanovski return and fight like by the end of this year?
It's not going to matter. Volkanovski's going to trash both of them.
Well, I agree, but
who would I be more excited? Rodriguez, because of this. Like, who's a bigger threat to him? Rodriguez. I mean,
Rodriguez can snipe him. Emmett would have to fight perfectly for 5 rounds. Yeah,
he could still throw a flying knee. He could still land a high kick. He could land something perfectly. Where Emmett would have to outpoint him, and I can't imagine that happening against Volkan. I think I like Josh Emmett. I really do as a person. Like, I've interviewed him a bunch of times. He's just one of the good guys, overachiever, kind of like when he joined the UFC. You're talking about a guy like middle of the card kind of guy. Like, you never really, he came in with Team Alpha Male, had Cody Garbrandt, TJ Dillis, all these guys, and he Chad Mendez was still on the team then, and Uriah Faber and all this. Like, he wasn't the guy you were to talk about. He was the, if you reach out to Team Alpha Male to set up an interview, he's 6th or 7th choice.
Oh yeah, it's like is Danny Castillo still fighting? Can I talk to him?
yeah. I heard Sage Northcutt was in the gym. Is he around? So I'd like guys like that. Like, I'd like guys that have overachieved. I like that he has this little chip on his shoulder of like, when he was talking about people betting against him. He's like, yeah, I'm not gonna do any more interviews with all these people. I always say I don't say no to interviews and people picking against me. Like, I like this little bit of like me against the world attitude.
Yeah.
But I mean, Rodriguez is the guy that he's more exciting. I mean, he's like I said, he's one of the best athletes in the entire sport. He's an outfighter with good volume, really good striking, good boxing, nice jab, decent pop. His kicks are sensational. I mean, tons of kicks, great teep kicks, blazing fast high kicks, great calf kicks, some of the best body kicks in the history of the game. He's also added these oblique kicks in, and it was funny where they call it oblique. I just think the obliques are like your stomach, but those kicks to the knees that John Jones likes to do. I like that he follows his kicks into his punches. Like, his kicks set up his punches. I've told this before. Like, I was there in Boston when he fought Jeremy Stevens, and I did the public workout. And him kicking the pads was louder than Dominic Reyes kicking the pads.
Jeez.
It was something that I was just like, and I was, for sure, they let me go up real close. I was like, basically standing on the ropes of the boxing ring, and right there. And it was just like, wow, his kicks are incredible. Spinning attack. It said he was doing that stuff. He was doing spinning attacks. Obviously, he was entertaining too. He gets that part of it too. So he was doing even more stuff that he does in fights. Aerial attacks, flying knees. He hasn't been much of an offensive grappler, and he has struggled defensively grappling, but it was been a really long time. Like, you got to go back to the Frankie Edgar fight was when he really showed a big hole in his grapple. One, you're talking about one of the greatest MMA wrestlers of all time, and like 100 years ago. Now, of course, he hasn't been matched against wrestlers. He also has been out, as you mentioned. He's been out, so that's another reason why it's been so long. But he had much better takedown defense against Jeremy Stevens. He made Jeremy Stevens wrestle with him, which is surprising. It causing a guy like that to want to wrestle. And he has got experience. 5 rounds, 25 minutes. Josh Emmett is 30. He turns 38 in a month.
Yep.
And I've been waiting. And again, I don't like saying these things about Josh Emmett because he's not your Glover Teixeira, but he isn't I feel that like your JV version of Glover Teixeira. What I mean by that is just like this guy just put his time in, and now he's fighting for the title. But I'm waiting for his bottoms just to drop out because, one, he's in the weight class that isn't for young guys, and he's had some wars. I mean, you think about the Jeremy Stevens fight, the Shane Burgos, Calvin Kattar.
He's had some injuries, some pretty serious ones. Yeah,
like tons. But remember, they thought he was never going to fight again. The Jeremy Stevens broke his face.
Yep.
And then you mentioned what was it? It was Burgos fight where didn't he tear his ACL in the fight first minute in
the fight. Yep.
Yeah, and still showed how insanely tough the guy is. Which is I'll never get over. I'll never stop being amazed by MMA fighters who tear ACLs and finish fights, and you see NFL players can't finish. The game. It's so incredible. Everybody who's done it. There's been a lot of guys who've done it. Also, his body, he's had a long wrestling career, so that could hurt. But all that said, he's still defying the odds, putting Father Time on hold. He continues to look good. He's a short, stocky guy with quick hands. Throws a lot of combinations. I think he's got good power in both of his hands. His short right is his best punch. That's the one that probably, if he beats Rodriguez, it could be that shot right there, landing a big shot and putting him out. I like that he goes down to the body before going upstairs. Like he knows that his body shots set up his big power shots with his hands. He can forget to reload his shots a little bit and then bring them back to his face a little slow, so leaves him open to counters. He's got to worry about that. He also looks for the perfect fight ending shot a little too much. Like I said he throws combination, but he can get kind of into the same combination over and over again. His lead leg is he really sits on his punches, but which is good to draw power, but obviously that makes it a huge target to kick. And because of his knee injuries, even more reason to kick it. So one thing I do love is that he's the guy that constantly ends every exchange by being the last one to land. So that will leave him open to counters, but he's good at making even exchanges he loses, getting some points in there, if you know what I mean.
Mm-hmm.
He has a wrestling background, and a lot of people are going to talk about that. They're going to talk about, this is an NCAA wrestler. I don't remember if he's an All-American or not, but still, Division One.
I mean, he wasn't Division One guy. He was an NAIA guy.
Oh, I'm
he
sorry,
was, like Sacramento.
But sorry, I'm sorry. So he definitely wasn't a Division One, but still, that's still very high. And
early in his career, like he wrestled more.
Yeah,
and yeah.
But a lot of people who do these shows will talk about their wrestling and say, well, if Josh Emmett can get some takedowns, he doesn't wrestle anymore. He hasn't wrestled in forever. He's gotten one takedown in 7 fights. And he doesn't even look for takedowns.
Oh,
yeah.
I mean, he has, I think, 9 takedowns in the UFC, or like 10 takedowns in the UFC, and like 8 of them were against Scott Holtzman. Like outside of that one fight where he repeated Scott Holtzman.
Yeah. Which is what you do when you go against Scott Holtzman.
Yeah. Like aside from that one fight, he has almost no takedowns in the UFC.
Yeah. That's just not his game anymore. He's like an anti-wrestler. He's using his wrestling to keep the fight on the feet. I don't know if he can wrestle anymore. I really don't. And I've said this about other wrestlers in the past. Wrestling is such a hard thing to sustain at a high level for so long, because it really is a, get on the rope, shooting on the shots underneath it, drill it with your partner. It's a grind. There's a reason why wrestlers do it for 3 months a year and not 4 months a year and not. I mean, I know. No, hear me out. I understand that guys wrestle year round, like the best ones, but I'm saying like the season is 3 months because of how hard it is. If Emmett was younger, I would feel better about his chances. If he still wrestled, I would feel much better. But I think this is the wrong opponent for him. And I think Rodriguez kicks him into oblivion. I think he's too fast for him. I think he destroys him with body kicks, leg kicks. I think he might even land a big shot. I'm going to say Rodriguez knocks him out. Give me Rodriguez by 3rd round knockout, something like a high kick or something.
Honestly, as much as I enjoyed that entire breakdown, you said my whole piece in the last 20 seconds. No,
it was great. Like, I really enjoyed all that, but you're full of shit.
You could sum up my whole take on this fight in the last 20 seconds of what you said. If Emmett were a little younger, if Emmett had demonstrated that his wrestling was still a viable weapon, I'd feel better about his chances here. But no, like, this is going to be rough for him just because of Rodriguez's speed and power advantages. Emmett would, in a different way than he would have to beat Volkanovski, he would have to be near perfect here for 5 rounds. Because if there's one thing we know about Rodriguez, you can be literally 1 second away from beating him. And
yeah, that's great.
He can find a way to snipe you, because, he was about to lose to Chan Sung Jung. Like, that's what sometimes people forget is, it was a great fight, knocked him out in the final second. He was also 1 second away from losing a decision. Historically, Emmett's been pretty tough to hurt. Like, he's been in some wars. He's been rung up a few times, but just flat out finished. It took Jeremy Stevens in the fight that really people hold up as the evidence that Stevens is a knockout artist. Like, Stevens sat him down with a huge punch and then just jackhammered him with a couple elbows, and that's what it took to put him away. I'm with you. I think Rodriguez is the first person since Stevens to finish Emmett, and Likely he sets it up by just feeding him a steady diet of kicks to the legs and body. Maybe he takes a kick upstairs, puts Emmett down, and finishes it with a couple of coffin nails. But give me Rodriguez by 4th round knockout here. With that, we come to the main event of UFC 284, a lightweight title matchup between reigning champ Islam Makhachev and challenger Alexander Volkanovski, the reigning featherweight champ who is moving up and challenging Makhachev in a bid for 2 division glory. Makhachev, the 31-year-old Dagestani, is 23-1 overall. He is 12-1 in the UFC. He has won 11 straight fights. That streak has brought him all the way to the pinnacle of the division, once ruled over by his mentor, Khabib Nurmagomedov. Over the last couple of years, he is on a streak of 5 straight finishes. Choked out Drew Dober in March of 2021, just under 2 years ago. Choked out Thiago Moises in July of that year. Tapped out Dan Hooker with a Kimura at UFC 267 in October of 2021. Came back in February of last year. Took on short notice Bobby Green and put a quick and ugly end to Green's resurgence with a 1st round TKO on the ground, and came back in October of last year at UFC 280 and wrested the title away from Charles de Bronx Oliveira with a 2nd round arm triangle choke submission. This will be the first defense of that 155-pound title, and standing in his way will not be any of the usual suspects at 155 pounds, of which there is no shortage, and he hasn't fought any of them yet. Hasn't fought Gaethje or Chandler or Poirier or any of them, but instead it will be Volkanovski in a super fight that seemed to just sort of make itself and then snuck up on us due to the surprising shortage of publicity that we talked about off the top. Volkanovski, the 34-year-old Australian, is 25-1 overall. He is a perfect 12-0 in the UFC. He has won a stupendous 22 straight fights since an early career loss at welterweight in like his 4th fight. He has won and defended the UFC featherweight title now 4 times. Won it from Max Holloway, defended against Holloway, Brian Ortega, Chan Sung Jung, and Holloway once again. The most recent of those was at UFC 276, where he took another competitive, yet somehow at the same time one-sided unanimous decision over the Hawaiian. Despite Volkanovski's incredible unbeaten streak, despite his complete dominance of his division, the odds makers are strongly in the corner of Makhachev here, perhaps owing to his dominance of the next bigger division, perhaps due to the obvious size difference between the two. Makhachev is minus 400, Volkanovski plus 300. Keith, we talked about it during the opening segment, so I won't belabor or revisit here. Just suffice it to say that this one is right up there with the highest level fights that has ever been put together in mixed martial arts, especially since the sport has reached this era. I mean, yeah, when Royce Gracie beat Ken Shamrock at UFC 1, they might have been the 2 best no-holds-barred fighters in the world, but
yeah.
Oh, I mean, I guess by definition they basically were, but this is unbelievable. The skills,
yeah.
the level of intelligence, and we've talked about it. You've talked about it more than me. You've championed it, and I've had to kind of get on the bus. Alexander Volkanovski might be the most intelligent and well-coached fighter in the history of the sport. Like picking up the torch from like your Randy Couture's back in the early 2000s, from your Dominic Cruz's, from your Demetrius Johnson working with Matt Hume. Like he is almost, I mean, basically he's an underdog, and I understand why he's an underdog. Sure. But if you were to pick a fighter to take those physical disadvantages that he's going to have and figure out a way to beat Islam Makhachev, you're going to go with Alex Volkanovski and Eugene Behrman and a couple months to run tape.
That's right. Absolutely.
On the flip side, there's a bit at stake for city kickboxing here. All of a sudden, Volkanovski is the big man on campus. I mean, he was always not always, but over the past couple of years, he's been the better and more dominant fighter than Israel Adesanya, but he was never the big name on the wall just because of the difference in personality and flash and size. But I mean, if like Volkanovski is the dude flying the flag for city kickboxing right now.
Absolutely.
I mean,
yeah, well, I know one thing that they kind of, obviously Adesanya is a bigger personality, flashier and everything. I think also another reason that goes with that is the fact that he's only there part-time. He also trains with Joe Lopez. So he's not always at city kickboxing. So,
right.
So I think that goes a little bit with it, but yeah, I agree with what you're saying.
This fight, we're both on record. I've certainly been on record as saying I don't like champ versus champ super fights unless somebody's really, really cleaned out their division. Like I was fine with Adesanya challenging Jan Blachowicz just because he was already on the rematch circuit in his own division. Volkanovski was getting there. I mean, otherwise he'd be fighting either Rodrigues or Emmett this weekend. And I mean, there's a certain amount of sizzle to that, but I thought he'd earned the right to go big game hunting. Does any part of that bother you, or are you just happy to see this fight happen? Or does it bother you more that Makhachev isn't fighting like Poirier or somebody?
No, absolutely not. I don't mind the super fights when it's earned, and if anybody's ever earned it, ever, Volkanovski.
Yeah,
I mean, it's to me when he was willing to fight Max Holloway a third time with everything to risk and nothing to gain. Again, for a guy that you've already beaten twice, just because you weren't satisfied with how bad you beat in the second time. I mean, that was a close fight. To me, call you a shot. Like, tell me what you want.
He's earned. He's got the bucket of goodwill that he can. Yeah, I'm with you there.
Yeah.
Give me your breakdown of this fight, man. Like, obviously, you and I are huge fans of Volkanovski's approach and skill set, but at the same time, Makhachev, the resume behind him might not be the same, but he's as dominant over his current division as any. Like, there's nobody in his division right now waiting for him that would be better than a plus 300 underdog like Volkanovski is.
Yeah. So his run up to the title, we talk about the run that Volkanovski. I mean, his run up to the title was super. Like, the not gonna be like he wasn't beating the top ranked guys, but the way he was beating everybody was like, holy crap! Like this guy. Yeah, he's being the 15th best lightweight, and most people are saying like, "No, this might be the best guy." And what he did to Charles Oliveira, I mean, we talk about how dominant Charles Oliveira was, and what he did. I think it was Joe Rogan who said this when Charles Oliveira goes on this unbelievable run, and people aren't even talking about a rematch. Like that shows you how good Islam Makhachev, which goes back to what I was talking about, the marketing. I really think that the UFC dropped the ball. And a lot of times the UFC marketing comes down to the week of the fight. So that like a lot of that changes, But to me, one of your competition, even though they don't like it, it's a little different. But boxing is a little bit of a competition. And like the big thing about boxing is the two best guys don't fight each other. It just doesn't happen. Like they're not willing to take the risk. You think about Floyd Mayweather and Manny Pacquiao. It took years and years to basically Pacquiao was kind of nearing the end and might as well get the
Floyd was smart. He fought Canelo too early. He fought Pacquiao too late.
Yeah. I know the big one right now, Crawford and Spence, they won't fight each other, even though they're the two best guys. To me, like that's what you sell. Like these guys are willing to test themselves. Makhachev is not saying they're both testing themselves in different ways. Obviously, Volkanovski, one stepping up. He's putting that long winning streak on. He's putting up the pound for pound. Though I will say this, side note, if we have an all-time war and Volkanovski loses, there's a close back and forth, could go either way. You could still make an argument for Volkanovski than pound for pound, being that he is the smaller guy, giving up the natural size and giving up significant size. Even though people talk about 10 pounds, it's going to be more than 10 pounds come fight night.
Yes.
And if it isn't, it's not the right, like it's different weight. Like not all weight is equal. So like that's what he's willing to risk for his greatness. But Makhachev, one, he's not taking on the other guys. He's willing to fight the best guy in pound for pound. He's not taking on your Gaethjes or your Benil Dariush, which obviously a huge risk taking on those guys anyways. But he said, I'll go to Volkanovski's hometown. I'll go to his country. I'll go into enemy territory. You're the champion. You know, the UFC didn't ask you. You offered it.
Yeah.
To me, just talks about the character in the – I shouldn't say character because that's obviously fighting is not about character, but the competitiveness of these guys and the belief in these guys. And also, I love this fight, and I love it because to me it feels like when sports come together and you have guys who, besides being the best now, but I think guys that one day we'll be talking about as the greatest ever, like they're going to be in those categories. Like one day we're going to be asking, well, is Makhachev the greatest light? Like I think he can go on one of these kind of runs, and obviously Volkanovski already has. When Tom Brady and Peyton Manning faced in playoffs, it was more special because they're all-time greats. If you're a tennis fan and Federer and Nadal faced each other, or soccer or football, European football with Ronaldo and Messi and whatever sport you're, when you have these, I feel like both of these guys can be that. So that's why I'm super excited. As far as the skills go, I'll start with Makhachev. Everyone always talks about his wrestling, and his wrestling's off the freaking charts, obviously, but he doesn't get enough credit for how good he has become on the feet. I mean, he battered Charles Oliveira on the feet before he finished him, and we've talked about how great Charles Oliveira's stand-up has come along. He's a southpaw that is elusive. He's got fast hands. He's got He's got high volume on the feet. I'm sorry, dude. I'm distracted. Let me back up.
Yeah, sure.
I'm going to start all over from. Is that okay if I just start over?
Yeah, of course.
Because I don't even know where I was. Because I actually want to say, okay. All right. So we always talk about his wrestling, and obviously his wrestling is amazing. But they really need to talk about how good he has become on the feet in his striking. I mean, his last fight, he battered Charles Oliveira, who obviously we talk about how improved Charles Oliveira has been and how much of a threat Charles Oliveira began on the feet. And Islam Makhachev was beating him up on the feet and then finally, dropped him with a big shot. He's a southpaw he's elusive. He's hard to hit. He's got some fast hands. I do think he needs to pick up his volume a little bit. But that's it. Everything else is great. He sets up his shots with feints. His fade back left hand is so good. He can get inside and loads big shots. It was right hook that blasted Charles Oliveira. He's got a great kicking game. I mean, lands kicks to all areas of the body. He's got a great kicking game because he's not worried about someone grabbing his leg. Like, go for it. Very strong, dirty boxing game, which goes to do with his size. And then we talk about, obviously, his ground game. His wrestling is off the charts. Get inside, upper body takedowns, shoot entries, similar to, Khabib Nurmagomedov, where we talked about this, where he explodes. Like, he isn't the guy who just necessarily explodes through the hips. He's more of a gets in the hips, turn the corner, single turns into a double, back to a single, working angles, chain wrestles so well that he's kind of just, it's not necessarily about getting that takedown. It's about just getting you off balance and then just kind of, closing that space. He's so good at that. So good at winning scrambles. I mean, you look at, I always mention this matchup because it was such a good one. Armin Sarukian, like the back and forth they had was so good. He's got those long arms and long limbs that he also can get, he can have a bad shot and still get around your leg or an ankle or something like that. His takedown defenses, I mean, is rock solid. His top game is amazing. He suffocates his foes from on top. Squeezes the life out of you. I described him in the past like a snake. Great ground and pound. I mean, you saw how he battered Bobby Green in that fight. He is a legit submission threat. He subbed Dan Hooker. He made a black belt like Thiago Moises look like a white belt. And then he subbed the greatest submission threat in UFC history. The guy who has the most submissions in UFC history, in Charles Oliveira, with ease. Like, that was the one area. It's like, oh, yeah, Makhachev's going to be on top, but, he's going to have to worry about the submission game of Charles Oliveira. And again, I understand it was like a club and sub, and that does change when your brain's rattled. But you can see the confidence he has in his growing. And he does have that, like, I hate the comparison of him and Khabib, but there is so many similarities. He has that chip. This Dagestan wrestling is better than everything. And I believe in that. Like, I believe in that Dagestan wrestling. Like, a Dagestan wrestler is a BJJ black belt and a high level people. I do believe that. Like but then you go over to Volkanovski, and I might be the biggest Alex Volkanovski like supporter, as in not as like a fan, because technically I work for MMA media, but I mean like his skills. Just watching his skills, like I'm in like awe of this guy. He's a short, compact striker who sets up his shots with feints, with cutting angles, setting traps, picking up his opponent's timing. Like a lot of the stuff that Israel Adesanya does, obviously his teammate, but also like when Demetrius Johnson was flyweight champion of the world, seeing the little things that other people aren't seeing. He fights with great volume. He uses pressure to set up his counters. He's so fast, and he might be even faster at 155 if he's not draining weight, more fluid. Really good at beating his opponents to the point of attack. Going against like a longer guy, and Max Holloway is actually taller than Makhachev. He was really good at like hand fighting and then kind of like grabbing the hands and pulling him, like playing like a tug of war with Holloway's hands to get him to let himself get inside and land hard shots against a longer guy. He's got an elite jab. He does so well to set up his jab to set up his power shots. He destroyed Darren Elkins with a jab. He destroyed Chad Mendes with his jab. So much variety in his striking. He's so well at keeping his opponent guessing, never doing the same thing, never attacking the same way, never throwing the same combination. Or, you see he'll throw this combination in the first minute of the first round. He's not throwing it again until the fourth minute of the fourth round. I love that he works the body. He did some good body work against Max Holloway. I keep going back to the Chad Mendes fight. He destroyed Chad Mendes with body shots. Some of the best footwork in the game. He cuts angles so well, and he never, like I say, not only does he never attack like the same combination, he never attacks on the same angle. Like he's always cutting. I watched a video, and it's obviously a little different, but the mindset is the same. I watched the video once of Kyle Dake, and I know you know who Kyle Dake is,
yeah.
But people who don't know who Kyle Dake is, you're talking about multi-time world champion in wrestling, 4-time NCAA champion, the only wrestler in NCAA Division I wrestling to win the NCAA championship in 4 different weight classes. I mean, he is elite of the elite of the elite of the elite when it comes to wrestling. He's a freaking wrestling god. Okay, both and internationally too. Like he's one of the he'd be the favorite to win the next Olympics. And I was watching a video of Kyle Dake, and he talked about cutting the smallest angles to not waste energy in unnecessary like movement, but still get that angle to be off the line and not coming straight at him. And everything that Kyle Dake does when he wrestles is for a purpose. The little smallest movement. And I feel like Alex Volkanovski is the same way. Like he's cutting and he's moving and he's landing strikes, but everything has a purpose. He's not wasting energy. And he's uses his footwork really good to trap his opponent at times, land strikes, land where they're trying to exit. Showed great lateral movement in fights, making him hard to be a moving target, being a moving target to land. He's good at getting in and getting out before he can get counted. He's got some good calf kicks. He's destroyed Max Holloway with calf kicks. I actually think throwing calf kicks would be really smart. Now, not going to the thigh against Makhachev because you don't want anything to get caught, but going down low to the calf, zap Makhachev's power. One, the power advantage he's going to have, but also like his ability to move, which would probably limit his ability to shoot. And when I say shoot, I'm talking about like penetration steps and wrestling, like shooting on the hips. The only negative, and I about Volkanovski's striking that I can think of is that he's not a one and done, land one shot, put you out kind of guy. Now I know he did that to Chad Mendes a while ago, but generally speaking, he isn't the guy. But moving up to 155, maybe we've seen this before. Guys get a little bump in power, so maybe he will have it. Now I'm not expecting him to knock out Makhachev with one shot, but he mixes striking and wrestling together so well. Obviously, I'm not putting him on Makhachev's wrestling level, but he's a good wrestler. He's how I talked about Makhachev being a not like blast through your guy, more of a chain wrestle guy. Volkanovski is more that blast through your guy. He doesn't have that like okay, I'm going to do A, you do B, okay, I counter C. He's not that guy, but he is just basically, I can just drive through. He's just such a great athlete. He's freakishly strong, like he's built like a pit bull. If he can grab a leg, you can go for a ride. He's hard to take down because, one, he's super short and stocky, which is hard to get under, but also he's constantly moving, so it's hard to time where he's going to be. If he's on top, good control, mean ground and pound. But the big thing about him, and I know I've been talking forever, the moment doesn't seem to get to him. When he's in bad positions, he stays calm. I think about Chad Mendes hurt him. He stayed calm when Max Holloway made adjustments in the second fight. He stayed calm and made counter adjustments to that. When Brian Ortega had him in that deep submission, he found a way to not give up, not get submitted against Brian Ortega, who that's his game. Brian Ortega's whole career is get behind and then land at this Hail Mary. And he still found a way to win. So as far as prediction go, like I said, both guys, I have such respect for these guys. I think the line is way off. I give Alex Volkanovski such a better chance. Like I said, this is what was the
minus 400 plus 300.
That is so disrespectful to Alex Volkanovski. And I get it. I get all the physical tools that Makhachev has. And he's a killer. He's a Dagestan killer. He's like, I get all that. But this is still Alex Volkanovski. This is still in my opinion, the most technically sound fighter in MMA today. If I was laying a bet, now this is not my pick, but if I'm laying a bet, I think the odds are, I'd lay Volkanovski to win because of and what I mean, I want you to be very clear. I'm talking about the value. Like that's what I'm talking about. I'm not saying I'm picking him. I'm saying the value there. I'd give him a much better chance. So that said, I hate picking against Alex. I hate doing it. I'm such a believer in this guy. I mean, we talk about the size. He's always smaller. We talk about, shorter. He's faced taller guys than Makhachev. We talk about him being physically smaller, stockier and muscle wise. This is a guy who's fought at welterweight, middleweight. He was taking on blockers in rugby at 200 pounds and all this stuff. And he has this amazing confidence in him where he almost wills things into existence that doesn't seem possible. And he's, as you mentioned, his intelligence is off the charts. I think he's going to put himself in the best opportunity to win. But even though he's really I really want to take him, he's a small featherweight. He's closer to being a bantamweight. And Makhachev is a big lightweight. So to me, I could see a bantamweight going against a welterweight. Volkanovski is going to need to put on an insane pace and out volume, and he could do that. He could be this target. Maybe he gets taken down 1 or 2 rounds. He loses that, but he still picks it up and builds. And with 10 more pounds and volume and cardio, he might be doing that. But until someone shows me that they can get off a bottom with Makhachev, I can't go against Makhachev. So I'm taking Makhachev. I view him as Khabib 2.0. I think he gets the takedown. I think he's just too big for Volkanovski. He holds him down in long periods of time. I think on the feet, I think we should have some moments. I think both guys can have moments. But at the end of the day, I'm going to go with the bigger guy. I'm going to go with Makhachev by decision. No, I know. I'm going to say Makhachev. I'm going to say he gets a submission. So he gets something like the 4th round.
I can definitely see it playing out that way. I'm not looking at the odds right now, but if there is a prop for Makhachev by submission, I'm sure it's not very generous. Something intrigued me that Volkanovski said a couple months ago. And obviously, we talked about what an intelligent guy he is, how well he game plans, and then how well he follows those game plans and makes in-fight adjustments. But he said, yeah, of course he's going to take me down, but I hope he's got more than that because I'm going to get back up. Volkanovski's route to victory here is going to be attrition. Makhachev has been past the 3rd round once, and it was in a fight that he completely dominated from pillar to post. And it's the BJ Penn lesson. If you're controlling the pace of the fight and you're not expending any energy that you don't want to, like even BJ Penn had plenty of cardio to go into the fourth round of a fight. It's when you're having to take a guy back down who keeps getting back up, or when you're having to keep back up on a guy that's advancing at you and pressuring you, that, you know, your gas tank gets tested. Volkanovski already has incredible pace and cardio. Those things should only get better at 155 pounds. You know, I don't know how close his walking weight is to 155, but I bet his weight cut is going to be trivial. Volkanovski's route to victory: invest in leg kicks early and often. Don't get stopped in the first 2 rounds. Like make Makhachev like work for his dinner for those early rounds, then take over late when he's getting a little more tired. Like Makhachev, in the times that he's been to the 3rd round against like even decent wrestlers and ground fighters, thinking back to like the Sarukian and Davi Ramos fights, he won all those fights 30-27. But by the 3rd round in both cases, he was having to work harder for the takedowns. Ramos actually got up from bottom position at least once that 3rd round. Those are things that Alex Volkanovski can do if Makhachev starts to get tired. Volkanovski can fight off those takedowns if Makhachev is losing a little bit of that explosion due to fatigue, due to his front leg getting marked up. I know I'm going way out on a limb here, but
do it, brother. Do it. Do it. I almost did it.
Like I said at the beginning of this segment, if you were to take the set of physical disadvantages that Volkanovski has and come up with one person to figure out a way to carry those to victory against one of the most dominant fighters in the sport, Alex Volkanovski is literally the person you would choose. He's not choice 1B. He is the guy. I mean, it's
nobody else. Nobody else in lightweight's beating him.
Yeah, nobody calls Volkanovski an overachiever because he's on a 22 fight win streak. But on one level, you can call him an incredible overachiever. Like 5'6", like featherweights are not supposed to do this. And I understand why he's a huge underdog. You know,
he was a huge underdog against Holloway the first time too.
Yeah, and because Makhachev, one of the most impressive things about him is the normal dynamic in MMA is when you're a great fighter, and both these guys are great fighters, like no question. They're both great fighters. Normally, you are just throttling everybody on the way up until you hit top 10 opposition. And then when you get the people who can really take care of themselves, you know, all of a sudden the fights become more competitive and you get decisions. It's been the opposite for Makhachev. He had more decisions early on. And as soon as he ticked over to fighting top 15, then the top 10 fighters, he started finishing everybody viciously. And it's because he's continued to improve.
Yeah, just to jump in, I got to correct. I said he was a big underdog against Holloway the first. He was only plus 145,
but still,
still. Anyways, carry on. Sorry.
Like that's not supposed to happen, but Makhachev has achieved it just because he's continued to improve. He's grown in confidence. His skill set has improved. I mean, you mentioned it. We'd say it about Oliveira, but Makhachev's improvement in his striking is, you know, almost as impressive. And this sounds like a cop-out way to say it, but I'm not going to believe Alexander Volkanovski is human until I see it. Like, he's been finding ways to beat people with physical advantages over him, noticeable size advantages for the better part of a decade now. And give me Alexander Volkanovski to become a 2-division champ in an absolute classic of a fight. And we will have all kinds of questions afterwards because it will be, do we do an immediate rematch? Does Volkanovski go back down and defend his featherweight crown?
I love it.
Everybody on the planet will be jumping up and down in their chairs with joy, except for Beneil Dariush, who will be jumping up and down in his chair. I don't know if he swears. I know he's like super religious,
of course not.
But you know, he'll tastefully kick the tires of his like hybrid minivan.
Oh shucks.
Yeah, I'm going with the big upset here in recognition that I'm stepping out on a limb, but I'm not trying to be hipster here. Like I really believe Volkanovski has a chance to win, and if anyone can thread that needle, it's him.
I was close. I was close doing it myself too, man. People who were counting out this, a lot of people just not giving Volkanovski any chance. This is a done deal, and I'm not one of them, man.
And if Volkanovski wins, the recap is going to include a conversation of, okay, where does he rank among the greatest fighters of all time?
He's up there. I'm going to put him in my top 5.
Yeah. If Makhachev wins, the conversation, I mean, it'll still be a great conversation. My first question to you will be, how close is Makhachev to passing Khabib's resume?
Ain't that far off.
But at any rate,
it's that 1-0 that hurts him. That 1-0.
Well, anything else to say about this one before we wrap up?
No, I mean, I could talk about this main event. It's incredible. Like, we should have just did a show by just the main event. We should have did 2 episodes. Yeah. It's fantastic. I'm glad that you picked him. I'm glad we both didn't pick Mark. I mean, I was really thinking about doing it, and you've got me. Maybe I should switch my pick. Maybe I'll pick him on Twitter and brag no matter which way it goes.
Here you go. Hedge your bets. That is it. This has been the Sherdog Radio Network preview for UFC 284, Makhachev versus Volkanovski. I've been Ben Duffy. He has been Keith Schillen. If this is your first time watching one of our previews, first of all, thank you. We hope you have enjoyed it. We do our best to bring you a mix of in-depth analysis and the occasional goofy aside and historical lesson. Please do like, subscribe, leave us a comment. Keith and I both man the comment section. So if you think one or both of us are crazy about any of these picks, if you have any hot upset picks of your own, please let us know. We'd be happy to hear from you and give you your props if those play out. Most importantly, join us for the recap. About 15 minutes after the main event on Saturday night, Keith and I are live on the Sherdog YouTube page. We switch chairs. Keith takes the host seat, and we will break down all 13 of these fights in the reverse order of how we did them just now. We'll start with that main event, probably spend a good 45 minutes on that alone, work our way down all the way to the first prelim, talking about what was good, what was bad, what was surprising, what was controversial. There's always something. And talking about what's next for some of the winners as well as losers. And most importantly, the live chat is open during that time. So we are taking your questions and your hot takes in real time, going back and forth with you during the show. It is our favorite part of our job here for both Keith and myself. And we have a growing community of friends there that hang out with us after the fights, and we'd love to have you along. Between now and then, thank you once again for listening. Enjoy the rest of your week, and by all means, enjoy the fights.